I kept my $160 million lottery win hidden from my family, and it turned out to be the smartest move I ever made. Just 1 week before Thanksgiving, my mother looked me in the eye and said I was an embarrassment, that my old car made the whole family look poor, and that I wasn't welcome at her table anymore. What she didn't know was that I had just become wealthier than everyone she was trying to impress combined. Days later, I shared a single photo online, and within minutes, my phone lit up with 42 missed calls begging for answers. I'm grateful you're here. Drop a comment and tell me where you're watching from. Just a quick note before we continue: some details in this story have been dramatized for storytelling purposes, but the message itself is completely real. My hands were shaking so violently that I nearly dropped my phone into the deep fryer. The kitchen of Le Petit Bistrot was a sweltering hellscape of steam and shouting, but in that moment, the noise faded into a dull roar. I stared at the screen again just to be sure. The numbers on my crumpled Powerball ticket matched the numbers on the website perfectly. $160 million. I felt the air leave my lungs. I was Tiana, the 29-year-old sous chef who drove a rusted Honda Civic and lived in a studio apartment with faulty plumbing. But in 1 second, everything had changed. Tiana, get your head out of the clouds and get those scallops plated now. The voice of Chef Marco boomed across the kitchen, snapping me back to reality. He was a tyrant who underpaid us and stole our tips, but today his shouting did not make me flinch. I looked up at him. Usually I would apologize and scramble to obey, but today I just stared. I folded the ticket carefully and placed it in my pocket right next to my heart. Yes, chef, I said, my voice steady. I went back to the line, but my mind was racing. I could buy this restaurant. I could buy this entire block. My shift ended at 11 at night. My back ached and I smelled like old grease and garlic. I walked out into the humid Atlanta night towards my car, praying it would start. As I turned the key and the engine sputtered to life, my phone rang. The screen flashed, Mom. My stomach tightened. Beatrice did not call to check on me. She only called when she needed something, or when she wanted to remind me of my failures. I took a deep breath, hoping to share my news. Maybe this would change things. Maybe money would finally make me worthy in her eyes. Hello, Mom. I started, but she cut me off immediately. Tiana, listen to me closely. We are finalizing the guest list for Thanksgiving next week. Your sister Chantel is bringing Brad's parents down from Connecticut. They are very wealthy people, Tiana. Old money. We cannot have any embarrassments. I gripped the steering wheel. What do you mean embarrassments, Mom? I mean you, Tiana. Beatrice's voice was cold and sharp. Look at your life. You are almost 30. You are unmarried. You work in a kitchen like help. And that car of yours is an eyesore. I do not want that rusted piece of junk parked in front of the house when the Wilsons arrive. It ruins the aesthetic. I felt tears prick my eyes, but I forced them back. So you do not want me to come? It is for the best. You have nothing to be thankful for this year anyway, do you? Stay away so you do not bring shame to your sister. Brad has a reputation to maintain, and having a sister-in-law who smells like fry oil is not part of the image. We will tell them you are working. It is not really a lie, is it? I touched the pocket where the ticket lay. $160 million. I could have told her right then. I could have screamed it into the phone. But her words replay in my head. You have nothing to be thankful for. She did not see me as a daughter. She saw me as a stain on her perfect picture. If I told her now, she would not love me. She would love the money. Okay, Mom, I said softly. I will stay away. Good. Oh, and send Chantel some money for the wine. Brad only drinks French vintages. Dawn to be cheap, Tiana. The line went dead. I sat in my dark car in the empty parking lot and laughed. It was a dry, humorless sound. She was worried about my car ruining her aesthetic. She had no idea that I could buy her house and turn it into a parking lot if I wanted to. That call was the final nail in the coffin. I decided right then and there. They would not see a penny, not one single dime. The next morning, I called Jalen. He was an old friend from high school who had become a top-tier asset protection lawyer in downtown Atlanta. We had not spoken in years, but I knew he was the only one I could trust. I took the bus to his office because my car would not start again. The receptionist looked at my worn-out sneakers and my hoodie with disdain. "Deliveries are in the back," she said without looking up from her computer. "I have an appointment with Mr. Brooks," I said, keeping my head high. "My name is Tiana." She scoffed and picked up the phone, dialing his extension slowly, as if she expected him to have me removed. When Jalen came out, he did not look at my clothes. He looked at my face. He saw the desperation and the fire in my eyes. He ushered me into his office and closed the blinds. When I showed him the ticket, he sat down hard in his leather chair. "Tiana, do you understand what this means?" "I do, Jalen. And I know what I want. I want a blind trust. I do not want my name in the papers. I do not want my face on the news. And most importantly, I do not want my family to know. Can you do that?" Jalen looked at me with a mix of professional respect and personal concern. "In Georgia, we can keep you anonymous through a trust. But Tiana, keeping this from Beatrice and Chantel, that is going to be hard. They will smell the money." "Let them smell it," I said, leaning forward. "But they will never touch it. They banned me from Thanksgiving, Jalen. They told me I was a shame. I'm going to teach them a lesson about worth." We spent the next 4 hours signing papers. I named the trust the Phoenix Fund because I was about to rise from the ashes of my old life. Jalen set up a new bank account that no one could trace to me. He gave me a burner phone and strict instructions on how not to raise suspicion until the money cleared. As I walked out of the Skyline building into the bright afternoon sun, my old phone buzzed. It was a notification from the family group chat titled The Elite Wilsons. My sister Chantel had changed the name to impress her husband Brad. "Tiana, Mom said you are not coming to dinner, which is honestly a relief because we do not have enough chairs for the important guests anyway. But we still need your contribution." Brad ordered 3 cases of Bordeaux for the party. "Your share is $500. Send it by tonight or do not bother showing your face at Christmas either." I stared at the screen. $500. That was literally every dollar I had left in my checking account. My rent was due in 3 days. If I sent this, I would have nothing until my next paycheck or until the lottery money came through. It was a test. They wanted to squeeze me dry even while kicking me out. They wanted to see if I was still their obedient little doormat. I opened my banking app. My balance was $512. I typed in Chantel's number. I hit transfer. In the memo line, I wrote, "Funeral costs for our relationship." I hit send. My balance dropped to $12. I felt a strange sense of satisfaction. That was the last time they would ever take advantage of me. It was the price of admission to watch their world crumble. I walked toward the bus stop, but I was walking on air. I was broke in reality, but a multi-millionaire on paper. The cognitive dissonance was dizzying. As I stood on the corner waiting for the bus, a sleek silver Porsche pulled up to the red light. I recognized the license plate immediately. Brad 1. It was my brother-in-law. He was wearing sunglasses that cost more than my rent. He looked over and saw me standing there in my work clothes, waiting for public transport. He lowered the window. "Hey, Tiana," he called out, his voice dripping with mock sympathy. "Car trouble again. You know, you really should get a real job. Maybe then you could afford something that runs. Or better yet, maybe you can find a rich husband like Chantel did. Oh wait, that requires personality, doesn't it?" He laughed, revving the engine. "Need a ride?" "Oh, never mind. I just had the interior detailed, and you look like you have been rolling in flour. Happy Thanksgiving, Tiana. Try not to burn the turkey." The light turned green, and he sped off, leaving me in a cloud of exhaust fumes. I watched the Porsche disappear down Peachtree Street. A month ago, that interaction would have ruined my week. I would have gone home and cried, wondering why I was not good enough. But today I just smiled. "Drive fast, Brad," I whispered to the empty street, "because you are driving straight off a cliff." He did not know that Jalen had just run a background check on him for me. He did not know that I knew his secret. Brad was not rich. He was drowning in debt. That Porsche was leased. The house in Connecticut was mortgaged to the hilt. He was living on credit cards and lies, using my family's desperation for status to prop up his failing ego. And now I had the power to expose him. But not yet. Patience was going to be my weapon. The next morning I went to the restaurant. The money had not hit my account yet, but I knew it was coming. Chef Marco was already screaming when I walked in. "You are late, Tiana. That is a write-up. One more strike and you are out on the street. Do you hear me? You are nothing without this job." I walked over to my station. I untied my apron. I folded it neatly and placed it on the counter. The kitchen went silent. The other line cooks stopped chopping. Marco's face turned purple. "What are you doing? Get to work." "No," I said calmly. I looked around the kitchen at the grease-stained walls, the broken ventilation system, the tired faces of my coworkers who worked double shifts just to survive. "I am quitting, Marco." He laughed, a harsh barking sound. "You cannot quit. You need this money. You have rent to pay. You have that piece of junk car to fix. You will crawl back here in a week begging for your job back." I picked up my bag. "I will not be crawling anywhere, Marco. And for the record, your risotto is bland and your leadership is toxic. Goodbye." I walked out the back door into the alleyway. The heavy metal door slammed shut behind me with a finality that felt like a gunshot. I took a deep breath of the cool autumn air. It smelled like garbage and city smog, but to me, it smelled like freedom. I walked home to my tiny apartment. I sat on my lumpy mattress and refreshed my banking app. And there it was. Pending deposit, $160 million. It was real. I lay back and stared at the water stains on my ceiling. For the first time in my life, I did not see the cracks. I saw potential. I saw the future. And I saw the look on my mother's face when she would realize what she had thrown away. I spent the next 3 days in a state of suspended animation. I did not go out. I did not spend money. I ate instant noodles and watched my family's social media updates. Chantel was posting non-stop about the upcoming Thanksgiving dinner. "Cannot wait to host the Wilsons. So blessed to have a family that values tradition and class." Blessed, luxury life, had no negativity. The no negativity hashtag was a direct dig at me. I was the negativity. I was the dark cloud they had removed so their sun could shine brighter. On Tuesday, Jalen called me. "Tiana, the funds have cleared. You are liquid. What is your first move?" I sat up straight. "My first move, Jalen, is to buy the building I am living in. And then I want you to make an offer on Le Petit Bistro. You want to buy the restaurant you just quit?" "Yes. Marco is in debt. He has been trying to sell for months, but no one wants it. Make him a lowball offer. I want him out by Friday." "Done." "And Tiana, what about the apartment? Why buy that dump?" "Because it is the perfect camouflage, Jalen. My family thinks I am destitute. I need them to keep believing that until I am ready to drop the hammer. I am going to buy a penthouse in Buckhead for me, but I am keeping this apartment as a stage set. When they come to laugh at me, I want them to see exactly what they expect to see." I hung up and went to my closet. I pulled out my best outfit, which was a simple black dress I had bought at a thrift store years ago. It was time to go shopping, but not for groceries. I took an Uber to the Lenox Mall, the most upscale shopping center in Atlanta. I walked into the Gucci store. The security guard tailed me immediately, his eyes scanning my cheap handbag. A sales assistant looked me up and down and turned away, pretending to fold scarves. "Can I see that bag, please?" I asked, pointing to a limited edition tote in the display case. The assistant gave me a tight, fake smile. "That bag is $4,000, miss. Perhaps you would be more comfortable checking the outlet store down the highway." I pulled out my new black titanium debit card, the one Jalen had messengered to me that morning. "I am not interested in the outlet store. I will take this bag. And those shoes. And that coat. Oh, and do you have a back entrance I can use? I do not want my family to see me carrying these bags." The assistant's eyes went wide when the transaction was approved. Suddenly, I was not a nuisance, I was a VIP. She offered me champagne. She offered to close the store for my privacy. Money really was a language that everyone understood. I left the mall with $50,000 worth of merchandise loaded into the trunk of a black car service. I had them drive me not to my apartment, but to the St. Regis Hotel in Buckhead, where I had booked the presidential suite for the week, while I looked for a permanent home. As I soaked in the marble bathtub that night, sipping champagne that cost more than my car, my phone buzzed. It was Beatrice. Tiana. I hope you are not sulking. Since you are not coming to dinner, the least you can do is come over tomorrow and help prep the vegetables. The maid called in sick, and Chantel does not want to ruin her manicure. Come around 10. Use the back door so the Wilsons do not see you if they are awake. I stared at the message. They wanted me to come and work as a servant for a party I was banned from attending. The audacity was breathtaking. I sipped my champagne and smiled. I typed back. Sure, Mom. I will be there. I would go. I would play their game one last time. I would let them treat me like dirt. I would let them dig their hole so deep that they would never be able to climb out. Because when I finally revealed the truth, the fall would be that much harder. I put the phone down and walked out onto the balcony. The lights of Atlanta spread out below me like a sea of diamonds. Somewhere down there in a suburban McMansion drowning in debt, my family was sleeping soundly, dreaming of their perfect Thanksgiving. They had no idea that the turkey was not the only thing that was going to be roasted this year. Tomorrow I would put on my old clothes. I would drive my rental car that looked just like my old Honda. I would walk through their back door with my head down, and I would plant the seeds of their destruction right in their own kitchen. The game was on. I sat on the edge of my sagging mattress and picked up the small framed photograph from my nightstand. It was the only thing of real value I owned before today. Grandma Rose. She was smiling that warm, gap-toothed smile that used to make everything okay. She was the only one who ever looked at me and saw a person, not a utility. The glass was cool against my fingertips, but looking at her face brought a sudden hot wave of memory crashing down on me. The silence of my studio apartment faded, replaced by the deafening bass of a DJ and the clinking of expensive crystal. I was transported back 8 years to Chantel's 21st birthday. Beatrice had rented a ballroom at the Hyatt Regency. The theme was Winter Wonderland. Everything was white and silver and dripping in Swarovski crystals. It was the social event of the season. I remembered standing in the service corridor, wearing a scratchy black polyester vest and a white button-down shirt that was too big for me. I was not a guest. I was unpaid labor. Beatrice had told me that since I could not afford a proper gift for my sister, the least I could do was help the catering staff. Help meant working a 10-hour shift hauling trays and refilling ice buckets while my sister drank champagne and danced. I remembered the moment clearly because it was the moment I realized I was truly alone. The heavy double doors of the kitchen swung open and Beatrice marched in. She looked magnificent in a silver floor-length gown, but her face was twisted in that familiar sneer she reserved just for me. "Tiana, why is the chocolate fountain running slow?" she hissed, snapping her manicured fingers in my face. "Fix it immediately. And for God's sake, tuck your shirt in. You look like a street urchin." I scrambled to check the machine, my hands stained with chocolate. I dared to look up at her and ask a question that had been burning in my chest all night. "Mom, can I maybe come out for the cake cutting? I just want to wish Chantel happy birthday. I have a card for her." Beatrice laughed. It was a cold, sharp sound that cut deeper than any knife. "Dawn to be ridiculous, Tiana. Look at you. You do not fit in out there. These are important people. Brad's friends are there. Future investors are there. We are selling an image tonight, Tiana. And you." She looked me up and down with pure disgust. "You are not part of the brand. Stay in the back. If anyone asks, just say you are with the agency." She turned on her heel and left the silk of her dress swishing against the dirty tile floor. I stood there alone in the hallway, listening to the muffled sound of applause and laughter as my family celebrated. I watched through the crack in the door as Chantel fed Brad a piece of cake icing smeared on her nose, laughing like she did not have a care in the world. She looked right at the door. She saw me standing in the shadows in my waiter uniform, and she just looked away. They did not see me as a daughter or a sister. They saw me as a servant who shared their last name by accident, a mistake they were trying to correct by hiding me away in the kitchen. I put the photograph of Grandma Rose back on the nightstand. My hands were steady now. That memory used to make me cry. It used to make me feel small and broken. But tonight, with a winning lottery ticket in my pocket, it made me feel something else entirely. It made me feel justified. They wanted a servant. They wanted someone to stay in the back and not ruin the image. Well, they were about to get exactly what they asked for. I would stay in the back. I would stay so far back they would not even know I was the one pulling the strings when their house of cards came crashing down. Grandma Rose always told me that the best revenge is living good. But she never told me what to do when you have $160 million to back it up. I think she would agree that it was time for the servant to become the master. I stood up and walked to the window looking out at the city lights of Atlanta. The ghost of that girl in the catering uniform faded away. She was gone. Beatrice had killed her that night at the Hyatt. The woman standing here now was someone they had never met. And by the time I was done with them, they would wish they had treated that girl in the black vest with a little more respect. The elevator dinged open onto the 35th floor of the Skyline Tower, and I immediately felt out of place. The lobby of Brooks & Associates was an intimidating expanse of polished marble and floor-to-ceiling windows that overlooked the entirety of downtown Atlanta. I clutched my battered purse to my chest, acutely aware of the grease stains on my jeans and the worn-out soles of my sneakers. I approached the reception desk where a woman with perfectly coiffed hair and a headset was typing furiously. She did not look up. I cleared my throat. "Excuse me, I have an appointment with Mr. Brooks." She finally raised her eyes, scanning me from head to toe with a look of practiced disdain. "Deliveries are downstairs," she said, her voice clipped. "The service elevator is around the back. Please use the correct entrance next time." I felt my face heat up. "I am not a delivery person. My name is Tiana Wilson. I am here to see Jalen Brooks. We went to high school together." She raised a skeptical eyebrow. "Mr. Brooks is a senior partner. He does not take walk-ins, especially not from personal acquaintances without an appointment. If you leave your number, I can have his assistant call you if he has time." She reached for a notepad, clearly intending to dismiss me, but before she could write anything, a door opened down the hall. Jalen stepped out, looking every bit the high-powered attorney in a tailored navy suit. "Tiana," he called out, his face breaking into a genuine smile. The receptionist's jaw dropped slightly as Jalen walked over and gave me a quick hug, completely ignoring my disheveled appearance. "I am so glad you called," he said, leading me past the stunned receptionist. "Come on back. Can I get you anything?" "Water. Coffee." "Just water, please." I managed, my voice shaking slightly. Once we were in his office with the door closed and the blinds drawn, the friendly reunion vibe evaporated. Jalen sat behind his massive desk and looked at me seriously. "Okay, Tiana, you said on the phone it was urgent. Is everything okay? Are you in trouble?" I reached into my pocket and pulled out the ticket. My hand was trembling so much I had to set it on the desk and slide it across to him. "I need you to verify this, Jalen. And then I need you to make sure no one ever finds out it was me." He picked up the ticket, his eyes widening as he scanned the numbers. He pulled up the lottery website on his computer, checking back and forth. Then he leaned back in his chair, letting out a long, low whistle. 160 million. "Tiana, this is life-changing." "It is," I said, my voice hardening. "But it could also be life-ruining, Jalen. You know my family. You know my mother, Beatrice. If she finds out about this, she will drain me dry, she will guilt me, She will manipulate me. She will use every trick in the book until I am back to zero. Jalen nodded slowly. I remember. So what is the plan? I want a blind trust, I said, leaning forward. I did my research. In Georgia, you can claim lottery winnings anonymously through a trust. I want you to set it up. I want you to be the trustee. I want my name nowhere near the public record, smart Jalen said, grabbing a legal pad. Very smart. We can call it whatever you want. The Phoenix Fund, I said without hesitation, because I am burning my old life down and rising from the ashes. But Jalen, there is one condition, a non-negotiable one. Name it. This trust has to be bulletproof, not just from the public but from my family. If my mother or my sister Chantel or that leech Brad ever try to claim a cent, I need legal iron walls around this money. I want to be able to look them in the eye and say, I have nothing, and have the paperwork to prove it, until I am ready to reveal the truth on my own terms. Jalen started writing furiously. We can do that. We can set up layers of LLCs. We can make it so that even if they hired a private investigator, all they would find is a maze of corporate entities. You will be a ghost, Tiana. A very wealthy ghost. That is exactly what I want, I said, feeling the first real sense of relief I had felt in 24 hours. Jalen looked up from his notes, his expression serious. Tiana, once we sign these papers, there is no going back. You are going to have access to resources most people only dream of. But you have to be careful. Money changes people, and it changes how people see you. I know, I said, thinking of the receptionist S. sneer, and my mother S. cold dismissal. I am counting on it, Jalen. I am counting on them not seeing me at all. Because while they are looking at the poor sous chef in the old clothes, I'm going to be buying their world right out from under them. Let's get to work, he said, opening a fresh file. As I watched him draft the documents that would secure my freedom, I knew I had made the right choice. My family thought I was nothing, a failure, a disappointment. They were about to find out just how expensive it was to underestimate me. The girl who used to serve their drinks was about to own the bar, and the tab was finally coming due. I stepped out of the climate-controlled lobby of the Skyline Tower, and the humid Atlanta heat hit me like a physical weight. It was a stark reminder that I had not actually left my old life behind yet. I was still Tiana the sous chef with the broken car and the empty bank account, at least for a few more days. I clutched the folder containing copies of the trust documents to my chest, feeling the sharp edges of the paper through the thin fabric of my hoodie. It was my armor, my shield. My phone buzzed in my pocket, violently vibrating against my hip. I knew who it was before I even looked. It was the family group chat. My sister Chantel had renamed it the Elite Wilsons 3 months ago, after Brad got a promotion that I was pretty sure he had lied about. I pulled the cracked screen out of my pocket and squinted against the afternoon sun. The message from Chantel popped up. Tiana, Mom told me she uninvited you from Thanksgiving. Honestly, it is probably for the best because we are tight on space and the Wilsons are bringing their own security detail. But listen, we still need your contribution for the alcohol. Brad ordered 3 cases of a specific vintage Bordeaux that his father loves. Your share is $500. Please Venmo it to me by 5 p.m. today. I do not want to have to chase you for it like last year. I stared at the screen and let out a dry, hollow laugh that caused a passing businessman to glance at me nervously. $500. They kicked me out of the dinner, told me I was an embarrassment, and in the same breath demanded I pay for the wine I would not even get to drink. It was classic Chantel. Classic Beatrice. They did not want my presence, but they felt entitled to my labor and my wallet. I opened my banking app. The balance stared back at me in mocking green numbers. $512.43. That was it. That was everything I had to my name until my next paycheck from the restaurant or until the lottery funds cleared. If I sent this, I would have barely enough for bus fare and a cup of noodles. My rent was due in 4 days. If the trust money hit a snag, I would be evicted. A sane person would have said no. A sane person would have texted back that they could not afford it. But I was not feeling sane. I was feeling something colder and more dangerous. I was feeling the burn of a bridge I was about to light on fire. This was not a contribution. This was a severance package. This was the fee to exit a lifetime of manipulation. I wanted them to take my last dime. I wanted them to wring me dry one final time so that when I stood before them as a multimillionaire, I could look them in the eye and know that I owed them absolutely nothing. I tapped the transfer button. I typed in $500. In the memo line where usually I would put Thanksgiving or for wine, I typed something different. I typed funeral costs. I hit send. The screen refreshed. Balance $12.43. I was technically broke. I had no car. I had a family who hated me. And I had $12. But as I walked toward the bus stop feeling the pavement burn through the thin soles of my sneakers, I felt lighter than I had in years. I had just bought my freedom for $500. It was the best bargain of my life. Let them drink their expensive wine. Let them toast to their elite status. Let them think they had won again. They had no idea that they were drinking on the dime of the Phoenix Fund. And the Phoenix was about to rise. Smoke began to curl out from under the hood of my '99 Honda Civic like a white flag of surrender. I pounded the steering wheel in frustration. Of course. Of course it would die right now in the middle of Peachtree Street during rush hour. The air conditioning had given up 3 miles back, and sweat was trickling down my back, gluing my cheap uniform shirt to my skin. Behind me, a chorus of horns erupted. People were shouting, but I just stared at the temperature gauge, which was pegged firmly in the red zone. I was stranded. I had $12 in my bank account and a winning lottery ticket in my pocket worth $160 million. The irony was so thick I could taste it. I stepped out into the humid, exhaust-filled air to push the car to the shoulder. It was heavy, and my sneakers slipped on the asphalt. I felt eyes on me. Judgment, pity, annoyance. I put my shoulder against the hot metal and shoved, gritting my teeth. Suddenly, a low purr cut through the noise of the traffic. A sleek silver Porsche 911 pulled up alongside me, slowing to a crawl. The window slid down smoothly, revealing a man in designer sunglasses and a crisp linen suit. My stomach turned. It was Brad, my brother-in-law. The man who treated waiters like furniture and my sister like a trophy he had bought on clearance. He looked me up and down, taking in the sweat, the grease stains from the kitchen, and my hands pressed against the dirty trunk of my car. A slow, cruel smile spread across his face. Well, 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 if it isn't Tiana. Having a little trouble with the vintage ride, are we? He chuckled, leaning an elbow out the window. I straightened up, wiping my forehead with the back of my hand. Just a minor overheat, Brad. I have it handled. Handled, he scoffed. Tiana, that thing belongs in a scrapyard. Honestly, it is an eyesore. I saw you walking to the bus stop earlier and thought things were bad, but this is just pathetic. Look, I would offer you a ride, but I just had the leather treated, and you look like you have been wrestling with a deep fryer. I said nothing. I just looked at him. I looked at the Porsche that I knew was leased. I looked at the suit that was probably charged to a maxed-out credit card. You know, he continued, checking his Rolex ostentatiously. If you need help, I can call a charity service for you. There are programs for people in your bracket, Tiana. No shame in accepting a handout when you clearly cannot function on your own. Maybe they can tow it directly to the dump where it belongs. He revved the engine, the sound echoing off the nearby buildings. Anyway, I have to run. Big investments to manage. You know how it is. Oh wait, you don't. Good luck with the heap, Tiana. Try not to block traffic for the people who actually have places to go. The light turned green and he floored it. The Porsche shot forward, leaving me coughing in a cloud of premium gasoline fumes and dust. I watched his taillights weave through traffic, arrogant and aggressive, just like him. A week ago, his words would have crushed me. I would have cried right there on the side of the road, feeling every bit the failure he wanted me to be. But today, as the dust settled on my shoes, I did not feel shame. I felt power. I knew something he did not. I knew that while he was driving a car he did not own to a house he could not afford, I was standing there with the means to buy his entire life 10 times over. He called me a charity case, but in reality, he was the one living on borrowed time and other people's money. I wiped the grit from my face and smiled a cold, hard smile that didn't reach my eyes. "Keep laughing, Brad," I whispered to the empty air. "Drive fast. Enjoy the leather seats. Because very soon, I am going to repossess everything you think makes you better than me. And when you are the one standing on the side of the road with nothing, I won't even slow down." It happened at 4:30 in the morning. The phone did not ring. It just vibrated once against the plywood nightstand. A single notification from the secure banking app Jalen had installed. The screen glowed in the darkness of my studio apartment, illuminating the water stains on the ceiling. I unlocked it. There it was. The Phoenix Fund. Balance $106,000,042 after taxes. I stared at the number for a long time. I counted the zeros. I refreshed the page. It was still there. I did not scream. I did not dance. I did not call anyone. I just sat on the edge of my bed and listened to the dripping faucet in the bathroom. It sounded different now. Yesterday it sounded like poverty, a constant reminder of everything I could not afford to fix. Today it sounded like a metronome, a countdown, tick-tock. I got up and showered. The water was lukewarm, but I did not care. I put on my uniform. The white chef's coat was stained with old tomato sauce and burn marks on the sleeves. Usually I hated putting it on. It felt like a straitjacket binding me to a life of servitude. Today, it felt like a costume. I was an actress playing the role of Tiana the struggling sous chef, and this was my final performance. I took the bus to work. I sat in the back clutching my bag against my chest. I looked at the tired faces of the people around me. I wanted to tell them. I wanted to stand up and shout that I could buy this whole bus line. But silence was expensive and I was willing to pay the price. Keeping this secret was the only way to protect it. Le Petit Bistro was already chaos when I walked in. The heat hit me like a physical wall. Chef Marco was red-faced, screaming at the dishwasher about water spots on the wine glasses. He turned his rage on me the moment I crossed the threshold. "You are late, Wilson. That is 5 minutes docked from your pay. And do not think you are leaving early tonight. We have a full house. Get on the prep line." I walked past him to his office. It was a cramped glass box that smelled of stale cigars and unwashed laundry. I placed a plain white envelope on his desk. "What is this?" he barked, not even looking up from his inventory sheets. "It is my resignation, chef." He laughed. A wet, dismissive sound that used to make me shrink. "You cannot quit. You need this job. You have rent. You have that piece of junk car. Where are you going to go?" "Another kitchen. You will never make sous chef anywhere else in this city." I looked him in the eye. My face was a mask of perfect, practiced sadness. I lowered my head just enough to look defeated. "I have to go home, chef. Back to the country. My grandmother is sick. I cannot stay in the city anymore. It is too expensive. I cannot make it here." It was a lie. Grandma Rose had been dead for years, but Marco bought it because it fit his narrative of me, the failure, the girl who couldn't hack it. He sneered, leaning back in his chair with a look of supreme satisfaction. "Fine, go. Run back to the country. You were never cut out for a real kitchen anyway. Leave your apron. Do not expect a reference, and do not come crawling back when you realize you made a mistake." I untied the apron. The knot gave way easily. I folded it and left it on the stainless steel counter next to his dirty coffee mug. I walked out the back door into the alley. The heavy metal door clicked shut behind me. The sun was setting, painting the Atlanta sky in shades of bruised purple and gold. I took a deep breath. I was unemployed. I was homeless technically since my lease was up in 2 days. And I was the richest woman in this zip code. I walked toward the subway, not looking back. Marco thought he had broken me. My family thought I was destitute. They were all sleeping peacefully in their assumptions. They did not know that the sky was darkening. The storm was coming, and I was the one bringing the rain. 3 days after I walked out of Le Petit Bistro, I walked back in through the front door. The hostess stand was empty, and the sound of Chef Marco screaming echoed from the kitchen. He was yelling at Maria, the elderly dishwasher who had slipped me extra bread when I was broke. His voice used to make my stomach turn, but today it just sounded like static. I pushed open the swinging doors. The kitchen went silent. Marco spun around, his face red and sweaty. When he saw me, a smug grin spread across his face. Well, well, well. Look who it is. I told you you would be back. Run out of money already, Tiana. Ready to beg for your spot on the line. I stood tall, wearing a sharp black blazer instead of my grease-stained uniform. I am not here to beg, Marco. And I am not here to work. He laughed, wiping his hands on his dirty apron. Then get out of my kitchen. This area is for staff only. Customers wait in the front. Not that you can afford to eat here. Behind me, the door swung open again. Jalen walked in holding a thick leather portfolio. He looked impeccable in a charcoal suit that cost more than the restaurant's monthly revenue. Mr. Rozzi. Jalen said, his voice smooth and commanding. My name is Jalen Brooks. I represent the Phoenix Fund. Marco blinked, confused. I do not know any Phoenix Fund. I am busy. Get out. Jalen placed a single sheet of paper on the stainless steel pass. I think you will want to read this. As of 9 this morning, the Phoenix Fund has purchased the outstanding lien on this property as well as your business loans from the bank. You were in default, Mr. Rozzi. The bank was quite happy to offload the debt. Marco picked up the paper. His hands started to shake. What does this mean? It means, Jalen said, gesturing toward me, that you are standing in Ms. Wilson's kitchen. Marco looked at me, his eyes bulging. You bought my restaurant. With what money? You are a broke-line cook. It does not matter where the money came from, Marco, I said, stepping forward until I was right in his face. What matters is that you are trespassing. You are fired. He sputtered, looking around the kitchen for support. The other cooks were staring, mouths open. Maria had stopped scrubbing a pot. You cannot fire me. I am the chef. This place is nothing without me. This place is a health code violation waiting to happen, I countered. And your risotto is still bland. Pack your knives, Marco. You have 5 minutes before I call security. He threw his apron on the floor, cursing as he stormed past me. The kitchen was dead silent. I looked at the staff. They looked terrified, expecting the axe to fall on them too. I walked over to Maria. She flinched as I approached. I took her rough, wet hands in mine. Maria, I said, my voice softening, you are not fired. None of you are. In fact, everyone here just got a 20% raise. And Maria, you are not washing dishes anymore. You make the best empanadas I have ever tasted. Starting tomorrow, you are on the prep line. Tears welled in her eyes. Thank you, Tiana. Thank you. I turned back to the room, feeling a surge of pride I had never known. Now let's get this place cleaned up. We have a dinner service to prep for. And tonight, we are actually going to season the food. I watched through the window as Marco's car peeled out of the parking lot. 1 tyrant down, 3 to go. My family was next. The elevator ride to the 40th floor of the St. Regis residences felt like ascending to Olympus. When the doors slid open directly into the foyer of Penthouse 4004, I stepped out of my old life and into a magazine spread. The space was breathtaking. Floor-to-ceiling glass walls offered a 360-degree view of Atlanta. The city sprawled below like a circuit board of light and motion. But up here there was only silence and the scent of expensive white tea diffusers. I walked across the Italian marble floors, my cheap sneakers squeaking slightly in the quiet. This was not just an apartment. It was a statement. The living room was larger than the entire house I grew up in. A white grand piano sat in the corner, though I did not know how to play. A crystal chandelier hung from the 20-foot ceiling, refracting the sunlight into 1,000 rainbows on the walls. I went to the master bedroom. The bed was enormous, draped in linens, with a thread count higher than my monthly income used to be. The walk-in closet was the size of a studio apartment lined with cedar shelves and velvet-lined drawers. It was currently empty save for the few luxury items I had bought at the mall. They looked lonely in the vast space, but I knew that would change. I walked out onto the terrace. The wind whipped my hair around my face. I looked down at the tiny cars crawling along Peachtree Road. Somewhere down there in the smog and the noise was my old apartment. The contrast was dizzying. Just days ago I was taping plastic over my windows to keep out the draft. Now I was standing on top of the world. But looking the part was only half the battle. I needed to act the part. If I was going to take down Brad on his own turf, I needed to speak his language. I picked up my new phone and dialed the number Jalen had given me. "This is Antoine," a smooth voice answered. "Personal styling and image consulting." "Antoine," I said, trying to sound more confident than I felt. "My name is Tiana Wilson. I need a wardrobe overhaul. Everything, from gala gowns to casual brunch wear. And I need it by Thursday." "Thursday? That is very short notice, mademoiselle. I am fully booked until next month." "I am willing to pay triple your rate," I said, cutting straight to the point. "And I need a crash course in wine, specifically French vintages. Do you know a sommelier?" There was a pause on the line. I heard the tap of keys. "I can move some things around. And yes, I know the best sommelier in the city. When would you like to start?" "Now," I said. "I want you here in an hour." I hung up and walked back into the living room. I sat on the plush velvet sofa and poured myself a glass of water from a crystal decanter. It tasted exactly the same as tap water, but it felt different. It felt like power. I pulled out my notebook. I had a list. Wine, fashion, etiquette. I was going to learn it all. Brad prided himself on his refined taste. He loved to make me feel small by using words I did not understand and ordering wines I could not pronounce. Well, he was in for a surprise. By the time I walked into that Thanksgiving dinner, I would know the difference between a Bordeaux and a Burgundy better than he did. I was going to beat him at his own pretentious game. The doorbell rang. It was Antoine. My education was about to begin, and I was going to be the valedictorian of vengeance. The phone buzzed against the cold marble of my kitchen island, disrupting the quiet hum of the Sub-Zero refrigerator. It was Beatrice. I let it ring 3 times before sliding my thumb across the screen. I put it on speaker so the sound would fill the empty cavernous space of the penthouse. "Tiana, honey," Beatrice chirped. Her voice was coated in a layer of artificial sweetener so thick it was almost nauseating. It was the voice she used when she wanted something. It was the voice she used on her wealthy friends before talking behind their backs. "I hope you are not still sulking about our little talk the other day. You know stress makes you age faster." "I am fine, Mom," I said, picking up a crystal flute of sparkling water. "What do you need?" "Well, we have had a complete disaster. A catastrophe, really. Mrs. Higgins, the housekeeper, called in sick. Can you believe the audacity? 2 days before Thanksgiving, and she claims she has the flu. It is so unprofessional." I took a sip of water. "That is too bad. I hope she feels better." Beatrice sighed a long, dramatic exhale that rattled the speaker. "The point is, Tiana, we are in a bind. Chantel is absolutely useless in the kitchen, you know that. She just got a fresh set of acrylics, and she cannot risk chipping them. And Brad? Well, Brad is busy entertaining his parents. He cannot be expected to baste a turkey." I waited. I knew exactly where this was going, but I wanted her to say it. I wanted to hear the words leaving her mouth. "So we were thinking." Beatrice continued, her voice dropping to a conspiratorial whisper. "Since you are not doing anything anyway, why don't you come over and help out? You know the kitchen. You know how to cook. It would really save the day. Plus, Brad loves your mac and cheese. He says it is the only thing you are good for." She laughed, a little tinkling sound that made my skin crawl. "So I am invited to dinner then?" I asked, keeping my voice perfectly neutral. There was a sharp intake of breath on the other end. "Oh, Tiana, let us be realistic. The dining room table only seats 12 and we are fully booked with the Wilsons and their associates. It would be incredibly awkward to squeeze a folding chair in. It ruins the flow. But you can fix yourself a plate and eat in the breakfast nook. Or take some leftovers home. It is certainly better than whatever you were planning to eat alone in that little apartment." I looked down at my hand. I was wearing a diamond bracelet I had bought an hour ago just to see how it felt. It sparkled under the recessed lighting. My mother was asking me to come and be an unpaid servant at a party I was banned from attending. She was asking me to cook for people who despised me and then eat scraps in the corner like a dog. Any other day, I would have hung up. I would have screamed. But today was not any other day. Today, I was a hunter, and she had just invited me into the den. "Okay, Mom," I said. "I will do it." "You will?" She sounded shocked. "Yes. I will be there at 6 in the morning to start the prep. I will handle everything. You won't even know I am there." "Good," Beatrice said, her relief palpable. "That is the least you can do after all the stress you have caused me. And Tiana, please wear something decent. Do not show up looking like a hobo. Use the service entrance around the side. We do not want the Wilsons seeing you come in the front door." I hung up the phone. I walked over to the pile of shopping bags from my spree at Lenox Mall. I pushed aside the Gucci and the Prada. I dug into my suitcase and pulled out my old work clothes. The jeans were frayed at the hems, the shirt was stained with bleach, my sneakers had holes in the toes. I held them up against the backdrop of the Atlanta skyline. This was my costume. This was my armor. Beatrice wanted a servant. She wanted a ghost. I would give her exactly what she asked for. I would be invisible. I would be silent. And while they were stuffing their faces with my food, I would be tightening the noose around their financial necks. I tossed the old clothes onto the velvet sofa. Tomorrow I would play the role of the dutiful daughter one last time. And it would be a performance worthy of an Oscar. Lenox Square Mall was a cathedral of capitalism, where the air smelled of expensive perfume and leather. I walked in wearing a hoodie and leggings, looking like I had taken a wrong turn on my way to a discount store. I kept my head down, pulling the hood up slightly. I needed the weapon for my final blow. The dress. The one that would say I own this town without me having to speak a word. I slipped into the Gucci boutique. The security guard tracked me immediately, his hand hovering near his belt. I ignored him and moved toward the back where the evening wear was displayed. There it was. A floor-length gown made of midnight blue silk with crystals hand-sewn into the bodice. It looked like a starry night. It looked like $20,000. I reached out to touch the fabric, and that is when I heard a voice that made my blood freeze. "Oh my God, is that Tiana?" I spun around. Standing near the handbags was Keisha, Chantel's best friend and the biggest gossip in Atlanta. She was holding a purse that cost more than my old car, looking at me with a mixture of confusion and amusement. Panic flared in my chest. If she saw me buying this dress, if she saw the black card, the game was over. She would call Chantel immediately. The surprise would be ruined. The leverage would be gone. I had to think fast. I slumped my shoulders. I dropped my eyes to the floor. I transformed instantly back into the beaten-down sister. "Hey, Keisha," I mumbled, shifting my weight nervously. Keisha walked over, looking me up and down with a sneer. "What are you doing in here, Tiana? Did you get lost on your way to the food court? Or are you applying for a janitorial position?" I forced a weak smile. "Actually, I am doing a favor for Chantel. She sent me to pick up a scarf she ordered. You know how busy she is with the Thanksgiving prep? She did not have time to come herself, so she sent me." Keisha laughed, a high-pitched sound that grated on my nerves. "Of course she did. Chantel always has you running her errands, doesn't she? Well, make sure you do not touch anything else. You might stain the merchandise." She turned back to the handbags, dismissing me as if I were a piece of furniture. I waited until she walked to the register to pay for a keychain. As soon as she was out the door, I straightened my spine. I signaled the sales associate, who had been watching the exchange with a bored expression. "I would like to try this on," I said, pointing to the blue gown. "And I will need it altered by tomorrow morning." The associate looked skeptical. "Miss, that dress is $20,000, and alterations on such short notice are—" I cut her off by sliding the black titanium card onto the glass counter. It made a heavy, authoritative clink. "Money is not an issue, and discretion is non-negotiable. If anyone asks, I was never here. Do we have an understanding?" The associate looked at the card, then at me. Her entire demeanor shifted. "Right this way, ma'am. We have a private fitting room in the back." I walked into the velvet-lined room, leaving my old life at the door. Keisha thought I was an errand girl. Chantel thought I was a servant. They saw what they wanted to see. But as the silk slid over my skin, cool and expensive, I looked in the mirror. I did not see a servant. I saw a queen preparing for her coronation, and the crown was already paid for. I parked my rental car, which I had specifically chosen because it looked just like my old Honda, around the block, so no one would see the temporary plates. I walked to the back door of my mother's house, my head down, my posture slumped. I was in character. I pushed open the door to the kitchen. It was already a disaster zone. Pots were piled in the sink, vegetable peelings covered the floor. Beatrice was frantically trying to arrange a floral centerpiece, her face tight with stress. "You are late," she snapped, not even looking up. "The potatoes need peeling, and do not make a mess, Tiana. The Wilsons are in the living room, and I do not want them smelling onions." I put my bag in the corner and started working. The familiar rhythm of the kitchen took over. Chop, peel, slice. But my ears were tuned to the voices drifting in from the living room. Brad's voice was loud and booming. "The market is volatile right now, Dad, but I have got a handle on it. These crypto investments are going to pay off big. Triple returns by Christmas." His father, a man with a voice like gravel, chuckled. "Just make sure you are diversified, son. You know how these things go." I walked out to the dining room to set the table. They were all sitting there. Brad, his parents, and Chantel. They looked like a tableau from a country club brochure. Linen suits, pearls, and fake tans. Brad looked up and saw me. He did not smile. He did not say hello. He just pointed at his shoes. "Hey, Tiana, since you are already down there, grab a rag and give these a shine, would you?" I stepped in a puddle on the way in, and I cannot greet the guests with muddy loafers. The room went silent. Chantel giggled nervously. Beatrice looked horrified, but not at Brad. She was horrified that I might say no. "Brad? Honey, maybe Tiana is busy," Chantel murmured. "Busy doing what?" Brad scoffed. "Peeling potatoes. She is here to help, right? That is what help does." I looked at Brad. I looked at his expensive Italian loafers that were probably leased just like his car. I felt a burning rage in my chest, but I tamped it down. This was part of the plan. Let them dig. Let them dig until they hit bedrock. I walked back into the kitchen. I grabbed a clean rag. I walked back out. I knelt down in front of Brad. The humiliation was physical. It felt like a weight on my shoulders. I wiped the mud from his shoes. I polished the leather until it shone. "There," I said, standing up, "good as new." Brad didn't even look at me. He just went back to talking about his investments. "Thanks," he muttered. "Now get me a scotch, and make it a double." I walked back into the kitchen. My hands were shaking, not from fear but from adrenaline. I had just polished the shoes of a man who was drowning in debt while I had $100 million in the bank. The power dynamic in the room was so twisted it was almost funny. I poured the scotch. I spit in it. Just a little. Childish, maybe. But it made me smile. "Here you go, Brad," I said, placing the glass on the coaster. "Enjoy." He took a sip and grimaced. "Cheap stuff, Beatrice. You really need to upgrade your bar if you want to play in the big leagues." I walked back to the kitchen and picked up my knife. The potatoes were waiting, and so was my revenge. Every insult, every order, every dismissive glance was just fuel for the fire. And tomorrow I was going to burn this whole house down. I stood alone in the heat of the kitchen stirring the heavy pot of bechamel sauce. The air was thick with the smell of roasting turkey and sage. But beneath the familiar aromas of Thanksgiving lay a heavy silence. I was in the house I grew up in, but I felt like a ghost haunting the hallways. Beatrice and Chantel were in the living room laughing loudly at something Brad had said. Their laughter sounded tinny and desperate through the swinging door. I turned down the heat on the stove and reached into the pocket of my frayed jeans. I pulled out a small glass vial corked at the top. Inside lay a pinch of deep crimson threads. It was Iranian Sargol saffron, the highest grade in the world. I had bought it yesterday at an international specialty market in Buckhead. This tiny jar cost $300. It was worth more than the entire spread of food sitting on the counter. I uncorked the vial. The scent drifted up earthy and metallic with a hint of honey. This was my secret signature, a test. Brad claimed to be a man of the world, a connoisseur of fine things. If he was who he said he was, he would recognize the flavor immediately. If he was the fraud I suspected he was, he would not even notice. I sprinkled the red threads into the creamy white sauce, watching them bleed a rich golden yellow into the mixture. It was a private joke, a way of injecting my true net worth into a meal they thought was charity work. I was feeding them gold and they thought they were eating dust. The kitchen door swung open with a bang. I quickly shoved the empty vial back into my pocket. Chantel breezed in, holding a half-empty glass of wine. She looked me up and down, her eyes landing on the pot I was stirring. "What are you doing, Tiana?" she asked, wrinkling her nose. "I am just finishing the sauce for the side dish," I said, keeping my voice low and submissive. Chantel stepped closer, peering into the pot. She saw the flecks of red saffron swirling in the yellow cream. Her face twisted in disgust. "Ew, what is that red stuff? Is that dried grass? Did you bring that from your apartment? It is just a little seasoning, Chantel, to give it color." She let out a scoff that was pure condescension. "Listen to me, Tiana. Do not put your cheap expired spices in Brad's food. He has a very refined palate. He is used to eating at five-star restaurants, not whatever greasy spoon diner you work at. If you ruin this dinner with your bargain bin herbs, Mom will kill you." I looked at my sister. I looked at her acrylic nails that were probably done on credit. I looked at her dress that was a season old. She was lecturing me about refinement while standing in a kitchen that smelled like desperation. "It is not cheap, Chantel," I said, fighting the urge to smile. "It is actually quite special." Whatever, she snapped, turning away. "Just do not mess it up, and try to be quiet. Brad is telling a story about his time in the Hamptons, and the noise of your cooking is distracting him." She walked out, letting the door slam behind her. I turned back to the stove. I stirred the sauce, watching the gold swirl and dance. She called it cheap trash. She had no idea she was looking at the most expensive ingredient in the house. "Eat up, Chantel," I whispered to the bubbling pot. "Enjoy the taste of everything you can never afford. Because after today, this is the closest you are ever going to get to a life of luxury." I was carrying a tray of polished silverware past the heavy oak door of my father's old study when a sound stopped me dead in my tracks. It was Brad, but it was not the booming, confident baritone he used at the dinner table to impress my mother. It was a high, thin whisper laced with panic. The door was cracked open just an inch, and through the gap I could see him pacing back and forth, his hand running through his perfectly gelled hair, messing it up in a way that would have horrified him if he noticed. I stepped closer, pressing my back against the wall next to the doorframe. I held my breath, making myself as small and invisible as the servant they treated me like. "Please, you have to give me until Monday," Brad hissed into his cell phone. "I am good for it. You know I am good for it. The wire transfer is stuck in escrow. It happens all the time with international accounts." There was a pause. Whoever was on the other end was clearly not buying his story. Brad's voice rose in pitched desperation, cracking the veneer of his cool exterior. "Do not come to the house. Do not you dare come here. My in-laws are here. If you show up, you get nothing. Do you hear me? 0. I need 3 days. Just 3 days to liquidate some assets. That was the moment I stopped breathing. If it were you, what would you do next? Comment below and let me know you're still watching. Because what I did after this was no accident. Quick note, the next part contains some dramatized details for storytelling. Watch at your discretion. I slowly set the silver tray down on the hallway table, moving with the agonizing slowness of a bomb technician to ensure the metal did not clink. I pulled my phone from the pocket of my stained jeans. My hands were steady. I opened the voice memo app and pressed the big red button. I held the phone up to the crack in the door. "Listen to me, Tony," Brad pleaded, his voice shaking. "I have a lead on a new investor. Family money. They are gullible. I just need to get them to sign the papers. Once I have their buy-in, I will pay you double. Just keep your goons away from my house." My blood ran cold. He was talking about my parents. He was talking about Beatrice and her desperate need to be part of the elite. He was planning to drain them dry to pay off a loan shark named Tony. The Porsche, the suits, the expensive wine, it was all a lie. He was not a financial genius. He was a con artist in a leased suit. Suddenly, I heard the click-clack of heels approaching from the living room. It was Chantel. I quickly slid my phone back into my pocket and picked up the tray, my heart hammering against my ribs. Brad shifted instantly. I heard him hang up the phone. "Hey, babe," he called out, his voice suddenly smooth and deep again, the panic vanishing like a magic trick. "Just finishing up a call with the partners in London. This merger is a beast, but the payout is going to be massive." Chantel breezed past me without even glancing in my direction. To her, I was just part of the furniture. She pushed open the study door, beaming at her husband. "Brad, honey, come join us. Dad is opening the scotch and he wants to ask you about that tech stock you mentioned. He is ready to write the check." "I will be right there," Princess Brad said, flashing a smile that did not reach his terrified eyes. "Just closing the deal." I watched them for a second longer. Brad kissed Chantel on the forehead. He looked like the perfect husband, the perfect son-in-law. But I knew the truth. I felt the phone burning in my pocket. I had him. I had the receipt. I walked back to the kitchen, the silver tray heavy in my hands. But my spirit felt light. Brad was not just annoying, he was a parasite. And now I held the pesticide. I would not use it yet. I would wait until the moment was perfect, until everyone was watching, until he had nowhere to run. Beatrice wanted a memorable Thanksgiving. I was going to give her one she would never forget. The clock on the microwave blinked midnight. My back was screaming, and my hands were raw from scrubbing pans, but the kitchen was finally spotless. The turkey was brine, the sides were prepped, and the silver was polished to a mirror shine. I had spent 6 hours working as an unpaid servant in a house where I wasn't even welcome to sit down. Beatrice walked in, a glass of wine in her hand. She looked around the kitchen, her eyes scanning for flaws. Finding none, she let out a sigh that sounded more like disappointment than relief. "Well, it looks acceptable," she said, taking a sip of wine. "At least you did not burn anything. Though I suppose basic competence is the minimum expectation." She walked over to the counter where a plastic grocery bag sat. It was bulging and greasy. She picked it up with 2 fingers as if it were contaminated. "Here," she said, tossing it at me. I caught it instinctively. It was warm and smelled of stale grease. "Take this. It is some of the trim from the roast and the vegetables that were not pretty enough for the platter. You can make a soup or something. No point in wasting it on the dog when you probably have nothing in your fridge." I looked at the bag. Scraps. She was giving me literal garbage wrapped in a plastic bag and calling it generosity. This was my payment. This was my value in her eyes. The leftover bits that were not good enough for the people who mattered. "Thanks, Mom," I said, my voice flat. "Dawn to mention it," she replied, turning her back to me to rinse her glass. "And listen, Tiana. Tomorrow. Do not come too early. The Wilsons like to sleep in and have a quiet breakfast. I do not want you banging around in the kitchen disturbing them. Come around 11, use the side door, and for heaven's sake, try to do something with your hair. You look like you just rolled out of bed. I tightened my grip on the bag. 11. Use the side door. Fix your hair. Every command was a reminder of my place. But as I looked at her back at the hunched shoulders of a woman who was trying so hard to be something she wasn't, I felt a strange flicker of pity. She was so small, so petty. And she had no idea that the daughter she was dismissing was about to eclipse her entire existence. I will be there, Mom, I said, but I want to be using the side door. What she asked, turning around, her brow furrowed. Nothing, I said quickly, just, Happy Thanksgiving. I walked out the back door into the cool night air. The darkness wrapped around me like a blanket. I walked down the driveway past the leased Porsche, past the manicured lawn that was mortgaged to the hilt. I reached the large green trash cans at the end of the driveway. I lifted the lid. I looked at the bag of scraps in my hand. I did not need her charity. I did not need her leftovers. I dropped the bag into the bin. It landed with a dull thud next to a discarded wine bottle. I walked to my rental car parked in the shadows down the street. I got in and started the engine. The heater kicked on, blasting warm air onto my cold hands. I drove away, leaving the house behind me in the rearview mirror. It looked small from a distance. Just a house. Not a fortress. Not a prison. Just a building filled with people who were about to have the worst day of their lives. I drove toward Buckhead, toward the St. Regis, toward a bed that cost more than my mother's car. I was done eating scraps. Tomorrow I was feasting. And the main course was going to be the truth. The sun rose over Atlanta, casting its golden light on two very different worlds. In the suburbs, the alarm clock at my mother's house screamed at 6 in the morning. Beatrice rolled out of bed, her hair in rollers, her face slathered in night cream. She marched downstairs expecting to smell coffee and roasting poultry. Instead, she smelled stale air and panic. The kitchen was cold. The 20-pound turkey sat in the sink rock hard and frozen solid. I had not taken it out of the freezer before I left last night because, frankly, that was not my job. Beatrice let out a shriek that woke the dog. "Chantel, get down here!" she screamed up the stairs. Chantel stumbled into the kitchen wearing a silk sleeping mask pushed up on her forehead. "What is it, Mom?" "It is 6 a.m. The bird is frozen," Beatrice hissed, poking the icy carcass. "And where is Tiana? She said she would be here to prep. Call her. Tell her to get here now." 10 miles away in the master suite of the St. Regis penthouse, I woke up to the sound of Miles Davis playing softly on the surround sound system. The blackout curtains parted silently at the touch of a button, revealing the city skyline bathed in morning mist. I stretched my limbs, sinking deeper into the Egyptian cotton sheets. There was no screaming. There was no frozen turkey. I walked into my kitchen, which was gleaming and white. A private chef named Andre was already there, quietly chopping truffles for the stuffing. He looked up and smiled. "Good morning, Ms. Wilson. Your cappuccino is ready on the counter, and the masseuse will be here at 9 for your hot stone treatment." "Thank you, Andre," I said, taking the warm cup. It tasted like heaven. Back in the suburbs, hell was breaking loose. Brad's mother. Mrs. Wilson walked into the kitchen clutching her pearls. She looked at the unmade coffee pot and the frozen turkey with the kind of judgment that could peel paint. "Oh dear," she said, her voice dripping with condensation. "I assumed breakfast would be ready. In Connecticut, we usually have a light quiche by now. And is that the bird? It looks rather solid." Beatrice's smile was a rictus of terror. "Oh, just a minor delay, Eleanor. Our help is running late. You know how unreliable they can be. Chantel, make Mrs. Wilson some tea." "Now." Chantel groaned, looking at her long manicured nails. "But Mom, I cannot use the kettle. I might break a tip." I sat on my velvet sofa sipping my cappuccino while the masseuse set up her table on the terrace. My phone buzzed on the marble coffee table. It was Beatrice. Then Chantel. Then Beatrice again. I watched the screen light up, dancing with their desperation. I did not touch it. I let it ring. This was the silence I had bought. This was the peace I had paid for. They were drowning in the chaos of their own making, waiting for the servant to come and save them. But the servant was dead. And the woman who replaced her was getting a massage. I turned my phone face down. Let them panic. Let them sweat. Today I was not peeling potatoes. Today I was being peeled like a grape. The doorbell of the penthouse chimed, a soft, melodious sound that signaled the start of my real Thanksgiving. I opened the heavy double doors myself. Standing there were not social climbers or judgmental relatives, but the people who had actually been there when I had nothing. Jalen was first, holding a bottle of aged whiskey and wearing a relaxed linen shirt instead of his usual power suit. Behind him was Maria, the dishwasher turned prep cook, wearing a beautiful floral dress I had never seen before. Next to her were Carlos and Sam, the line cooks, who had kept me laughing during the worst shifts of my life. And finally, Andre, the private chef, stepped out from the kitchen, wiping his hands on a pristine white towel to greet the guests. "Welcome," I said, opening my arms wide. "Welcome to my home." Maria stepped inside, her eyes wide as she took in the soaring ceilings and the panoramic view of the city. "Dios mío, Tiana," she whispered, clutching her purse. "It is like a palace. Are you sure we are allowed to be here?" I laughed, taking her hand. "You are more than allowed, Maria. You are the guests of honor. This place is just a building. You guys are the ones who make it a celebration." I led them into the living room, where a table had been set up not with stiff formal china, but with comfortable seating and platters of gourmet appetizers that looked like art but tasted like comfort. There were no assigned seats, no dress code, no tension. Jalen poured drinks for everyone. "A toast," he said, raising his glass, to Tiana, "the woman who proved that you can take the girl out of the kitchen, but you cannot take the fire out of the girl. And to the Phoenix Fund for making sure the fire burns the right people." We clinked glasses. The sound was a cheerful ring, not the polite hollow tink of my mother's crystal. The food was incredible. Andre had outdone himself, but he insisted that Maria critique his empanadas. They stood by the kitchen island, laughing and arguing good-naturedly about the proper ratio of cumin to paprika. Carlos and Sam were lounging on the Italian leather sofa, marveling at the softness and telling stories about Marco's face when I fired him. I looked around the room. There was no pretense here. No one was trying to impress anyone else. No one was worried about networking or status or what the neighbors would think. We were just people sharing a meal and a moment of genuine joy. Maria came over and sat beside me, taking my hand in hers. "Tiana," she said, her eyes shining, "you deserve this. All of it. You worked so hard, and you never forgot us. Most people, when they get money, they disappear. But you bring us up with you. That is a good heart." I squeezed her hand back, fighting the sting of happy tears. "You guys were my family when my real family treated me like a stranger, Maria. I could never forget that." We ate until we were stuffed. We laughed until our sides hurt. We danced to old-school R&B in the middle of the living room, the city lights swirling around us like our own private disco ball. It was the best Thanksgiving of my life. And the best part was knowing that 10 miles away in a cold house with a frozen turkey, my mother was probably screaming at a dial tone. The contrast made the champagne taste just a little bit sweeter. While I was sipping champagne in Buckhead, the atmosphere at my mother's house in the suburbs had curdled into a toxic stew of heat and humiliation. The dining room was sweltering because the HVAC system had chosen this exact moment to malfunction. Sweat beaded on Beatrice's forehead, threatening to melt her foundation as she marched out of the kitchen, holding the turkey platter like a sacrificial offering. "Here we are," she announced, her voice high and brittle. "The pièce de résistance." She set the bird down in front of Mr. Wilson, Brad's father. He was a man who wore his wealth like a suit of armor, and he looked down at the turkey with an expression of polite horror. It was a disaster. The skin was blackened to a crisp on one side and pale on the other. The meat had pulled away from the bones, revealing a texture that looked less like poultry and more like driftwood. Chantel had been responsible for monitoring the oven, but she had been too busy locking herself in the bathroom to stage Instagram photos to notice the temperature spike. Brad stood up to carve the turkey, a forced smile plastered on his face. He picked up the electric knife and pressed it into the breast. A puff of dry steam escaped. The meat crumbled under the blade, flaking off in gray shards. The sound of the motor straining against the dry meat filled the silent room. Mrs. Wilson placed her napkin over her mouth and cleared her throat delicately. "Oh my. It does seem a bit arid, doesn't it, Bradley? Perhaps we should just focus on the sides, dear. I am not sure my digestion can handle that." The silence that followed was deafening. Brad turned off the knife. His face went from a forced smile to a mask of pure fury. He looked at his parents, who were exchanging glances that clearly said they wanted to leave. Then he looked at Beatrice. "This is a joke, right?" Brad said, his voice dangerously low. "Beatrice, you told me you had this handled. You told me this was going to be a 5-star meal. I am trying to talk business with my father and you serve him jerky." Beatrice stammered, wringing her hands together. "It was the oven, Brad. The thermostat is broken. And Tiana was supposed to prep it. She was supposed to be here to help." Brad slammed the knife down onto the table, making the silverware jump. "Tiana is not here, Beatrice. You are. This is your house. You wanted to play hostess. Well, you are failing. Fix this. Go in there and find something my parents can actually eat without breaking a tooth. Or so help me, I will walk out of here and take the grandkids with me." He stormed out onto the patio, leaving the sliding door open. A gust of hot air blew in. Mrs. Wilson took a sip of her water, looking at the ceiling. Chantel shrank into her chair, terrified. Beatrice stood there, vibrating with humiliation. She had been shamed in her own home in front of the people she desperately wanted to impress. She needed a scapegoat. She needed someone to blame for her incompetence. She marched into the kitchen, her heels clicking angrily on the tile. She grabbed her phone and dialed my number. I watched the call come in on my screen in the penthouse, but I did not answer. Beatrice screamed into her phone, leaving a voicemail that would become my favorite piece of evidence. "Tiana, where the hell are you? You ungrateful little wretch. This is all your fault. If you had come here to do your job like a dutiful daughter instead of being selfish, the turkey would be fine. You ruined Thanksgiving, Tiana. You ruined everything. Pick up the phone right now, or I swear I will come over there and drag you here myself. You are nothing but a disappointment." She slammed the phone down onto the counter, unaware that her reign of terror was about to end. She thought she was the victim. She had no idea she was about to become the entertainment. The phone buzzed against the white Calcutta marble of the coffee table like an angry hornet trapped in a jar. It was a violent, intrusive sound that cut through the smooth jazz playlist and the gentle clinking of crystal glasses. I looked down at the screen. 42 missed calls. It was a number so absurd it almost looked like a glitch. But I knew better. It was Beatrice. She was spiraling. She was losing control. And her instinct when losing control was to reach out and strangle the nearest thing she thought she owned. Me. Maria stopped laughing mid-sentence. She looked at the vibrating phone, then at me, her eyes wide with concern. "Dios mío, Tiana," she whispered. "Is everything okay? Do you need to answer that?" I picked up the phone. The screen was hot to the touch. I looked around the room at the faces of the people who actually cared about me. Jalen was watching me closely, his glass of whiskey paused halfway to his mouth. Andre was wiping down the counter, but his eyes were fixed on me. They knew my story. They knew where I came from. But they had never heard the beast itself. "I think you all need to hear this," I said, my voice calm and steady. "I think you need to understand exactly why I am not sitting at that table in the suburbs right now." I tapped the screen. I ignored the incoming call and went straight to the voicemail she had just left. I turned the volume all the way up and placed the phone in the center of the table next to a platter of truffle arancini. The room went deadly silent. Beatrice's voice filled the penthouse, shrill and distorted by rage. Tiana, you ungrateful little wretch! Where are you? The Wilsons are staring at us. The turkey is inedible because you were too selfish to come do your job. You ruined Thanksgiving. You bring nothing but shame to this family. I should have left you in that studio apartment to rot. Do not bother coming to Christmas. You are dead to us. Do you hear me? Dead. The message ended with a beep that sounded like a flatline. The silence that followed was heavy and thick. Maria covered her mouth with her hand, tears standing in her eyes. She talks to you like that. Like you are a dog. Worse than a dog, I said, picking up the phone. A dog she would feed. Me, she just kicks. Jalen set his glass down with a sharp clack. He stood up and walked over to the floor-to-ceiling window, looking out at the city lights. He turned back to me, his expression fierce. Tiana, enough is enough. You have played the pauper. You have played the servant. You have let them walk all over you because you thought it would make the reveal sweeter. But this is abusive. He walked over and put a hand on my shoulder. It is time, Tiana. Stop protecting them with your silence. Stop hiding in the shadows. You own this town now. It is time to let them know exactly who they just called a failure. Show them, Tiana. Show them everything. I looked at Jalen. I looked at Maria, who was nodding fiercely. I looked at the phone in my hand. It buzzed again. Another call from Beatrice. I did not answer. Instead, I opened the camera app. I walked out onto the balcony where the cool night air whipped at my hair. I looked at the view. I looked at the life I had built in a week. Jalen was right. The game of hide and seek was over. It was time for show and tell. I am going to post it, I said, turning back to the room. I am going to post the picture that burns their world down. Jalen smiled a wolfish grin. Make sure you get the car keys in the shot. I lifted the phone, I composed the frame, and I prepared to send a nuclear missile straight into the heart of my mother's dining room. I stepped out onto the terrace of the penthouse. The Atlanta air was cooling rapidly, but the fire in my veins kept me warm. The sun had dipped below the horizon, leaving streaks of violet and indigo across the sky that perfectly matched the midnight blue silk of my Gucci gown. I walked to the edge of the balcony and placed my hands on the cold stone railing. Below me, the city was waking up for the night, a grid of golden lights that stretched to infinity. Jalen followed me out, holding my phone. Are you ready? He asked. I am ready, I said. I turned my back to the city so the skyline would frame me like a halo. I picked up the crystal flute filled with vintage champagne. The bubbles caught the light like tiny diamonds. I reached into my pocket and pulled out the heavy weight of the Ferrari key fob. I placed it casually on the small marble table next to me, making sure the prancing horse logo was catching the light. This wasn't vanity. This was evidence. I didn't smile like a girl having fun. I smiled like a woman who had just won a war. I tilted my head back slightly, letting the breeze catch the expensive blowout Antoine had given me. I looked straight into the camera lens. I wasn't looking at the phone. I was looking at Beatrice. I was looking at Chantel. I was looking at Brad. Take it, I whispered. Jalen snapped a series of photos. He lowered the phone and looked at the screen. Tiana, this is lethal. You look like you own the sky. He handed me the phone. I scrolled through them until I found the one. It was perfect. The dress shimmered like liquid night. The champagne looked like liquid gold. The car keys were a subtle but unmistakable promise of power. And my face. My face didn't look like Tiana the sous chef. It looked like Tiana the tycoon. I opened Instagram. I selected the photo. My thumb hovered over the caption box. I typed slowly, savoring every letter. Thankful for cutting out the toxicity. First Thanksgiving in my new home. New life, Hajj, blessed Hajj owner. I didn't block them. I didn't hide it from their view. I wanted them to see it. I wanted Chantel to see it while she was scrolling in the bathroom to avoid cleaning up. I wanted Brad to see it and choke on his dry turkey. I pressed post. The progress bar zipped across the top of the screen. Posted. It was done. The missile was in the air. There was no taking it back. I set the phone down on the table next to the keys. I picked up my champagne and took a long, slow sip. It tasted like victory. Inside, the party was still going. Maria was dancing. Carlos was laughing. But out here in the quiet dark, I waited. I knew exactly what was happening 10 miles away. I could almost hear the scream that was about to tear through my mother's house. "Tick-tock, Beatrice," I whispered to the wind. "Happy Thanksgiving." 10 miles away in the guest powder room of the suburban colonial Chantel was hiding. She had locked the door and turned on the faucet to mask the sound of her sniffing. The dinner had been a humiliation. Brad was furious about the turkey. Her mother was spiraling. And the Wilsons looked like they wanted to call a rescue helicopter to extract them from the suburbs. Chantel sat on the closed toilet lid and pulled out her phone. She needed an escape. She needed to look at other people's lives to forget the disaster of her own. She opened Instagram. She scrolled past photos of perfectly roasted birds and happy families. She scrolled past her friends' engagement photos. And then her thumb froze. There at the top of her feed was a post from Tiana. Chantel blinked. She wiped her eyes, thinking the mascara was clouding her vision. She looked again. It was Tiana. But it wasn't the Tiana she knew. This woman looked like a movie star. The dress was midnight blue and hugged her body in a way that screamed haute couture. Chantel knew fashion. She spent half her life reading Vogue and the other half browsing luxury websites she could not afford. She knew that shimmer. That was heavy silk. That was Gucci. Her breath caught in her throat. She zoomed in frantically. The jewelry caught the light. Real diamonds. She knew the difference between cubic zirconia and the real thing because she had spent years trying to pass one off as the other. These were real. She zoomed in further. The table, solid marble, the glass. Hand-blown crystal. And there, sitting casually next to the stem of the glass, was a key fob. A red key fob with a silver horse. Chantel felt the room spin. Ferrari. Tiana had the keys to a Ferrari. She looked at the location tag. The St. Regis Residence's Buckhead. No, it was impossible. Tiana was broke. Tiana was a line cook. Tiana drove a rusted Honda that sounded like a lawnmower. This had to be a filter. It had to be a prank. Maybe she snuck into a hotel to take pictures, but the caption read "owner." And the confidence in Tiana's eyes was not something you could fake with an app. Chantel's brain short-circuited. The jealousy that hit her was not a slow burn. It was a nuclear explosion. She had spent her entire life being the pretty one, the successful one, the one who married well. Tiana was the designated loser. That was the natural order of things. If Tiana was rich, then who was Chantel? If Tiana was living in a penthouse while Chantel was eating dry turkey in a house mortgaged to the hilt, then everything Chantel believed about her life was a lie. She stood up so fast she knocked her expensive clutch into the sink. She didn't care. She didn't care about the Wilsons. She didn't care about Brad's temper. She unlocked the door and threw it open. She ran down the hallway, her heels digging into the hardwood, her face twisted in a mask of pure hysteria. "Mom," she screamed, her voice shrill and terrifying, echoing off the walls. "Mom, you have to see this. Look at Tiana. Look at what she posted." She burst into the dining room, waving her phone like a weapon. The Wilsons dropped their forks. Beatrice looked up from her plate, her eyes wide with alarm, expecting a car accident or a death notification. "What is it?" Chantel Beatrice asked, standing up. "Is she hurt? Is she in jail?" Chantel shoved the phone into her mother's face. Her hand was shaking so hard the image blurred. "She is not in jail, Mom. She is at the St. Regis. Look at the dress. Look at the car keys. Mom, she is rich. Tiana is rich." The silence in the dining room was shattered. The bomb had landed, and the explosion was just beginning. Brad snatched the phone from Chantel's trembling hand. His eyes scanned the screen with the precision of a hawk spotting a field mouse. He was sweating, his tie loosened from the heat of the broken air conditioner, but his financial desperation sharpened his focus. He zoomed in on the bottle sitting on the marble table. "That is not just champagne, Beatrice," he said, his voice low and tight. "That is a 1982 vintage Cristal. Do you have any idea what that costs? That is $5,000 a bottle. Minimum." Beatrice gasped, clutching her pearls. 5,000. Tiana does not have $5. She borrowed money from Chantel just last week. Brad ignored her. He swiped to the next photo, the one showing the panoramic view of the skyline. He knew that view. He had spent hours looking at luxury real estate listings, fantasizing about a life he could not afford. He knew the angle of the buildings, the specific curve of the glass railing. "I know this place," he whispered. "This is the St. Regis Residences in Buckhead. That balcony, that view. That is the corner penthouse unit. Penthouse 4004. Chantel looked at him, her face blotchy from crying. "What does that mean, Brad?" "It means," he said, looking up with a gleam in his eye that terrified me even from a distance. "The rent on that unit is $15,000 a month. And that key fob, that is a Ferrari. We are talking about $500,000 just sitting on that table." The silence in the room shifted. It was no longer the silence of embarrassment or failure. It was the heavy, suffocating silence of greed. You could practically hear the calculations clicking in their heads. The dry turkey was forgotten. The wealthy in-laws were forgotten. The only thing that existed was the sudden realization that the family punching bag was actually a gold mine. "Where did she get it?" Chantel shrieked, her voice rising to a pitch that shattered the quiet. "She stole it. She must have robbed the restaurant safe. Or she is dealing drugs. There is no way Tiana made that kind of money legally. She is a line cook, for God's sake. It does not matter how she got it." Beatrice snapped, her eyes narrowing into dangerous slits. "What matters is that she has it. She has been hiding this from us, her own flesh and blood. While we are here suffering, trying to put on a nice dinner for the family, she is sitting in a penthouse laughing at us. It is deceitful. It is cruel." Brad straightened his jacket. He ran a hand through his hair, smoothing down the mess he had made earlier. I could see the wheels turning. He was thinking about Tony the loan shark. He was thinking about the debt collectors calling his phone. He saw a lifeline. "She is obviously having a mental breakdown," Brad said, his voice taking on a fake tone of concern. "Spending money like that, posting it for the world to see? She is manic, Beatrice. She is going to blow it all or get herself in serious trouble. She needs guidance. She needs someone with financial expertise to step in and manage those assets before she loses everything. We have a responsibility to protect the family wealth." Beatrice nodded vigorously, seizing onto the narrative. "You are right, Brad. She is not equipped for this. She has never had money. She wants to know what to do with it. We need to go over there, right now. We need to get to the bottom of this." Mr. Wilson cleared his throat from the head of the table. "Excuse me, Beatrice. Are we still having dinner? We have not even had dessert." Beatrice waved a hand at him dismissively, as if he were a fly buzzing around her head. "Eat what you want. There is pie in the fridge. This is a family emergency." She grabbed her purse, her movements jerky with adrenaline. Brad grabbed his car keys. Chantel wiped her face and grabbed her bag. They moved as a unit, united by a common purpose. They were going to get that money. "Get the car," Brad Beatrice barked, marching toward the door. "We are going to Buckhead. Tiana has some explaining to do. And she is going to learn that you do not keep secrets from your mother." They stormed out of the house, leaving the Wilsons sitting alone at the table with the inedible food. They drove toward the city, their hearts pounding not with love or concern, but with the ravenous hunger of wolves who just caught the scent of fresh meat. They thought they were driving to an intervention. They had no idea they were driving straight into a trap. Brad drove the silver Porsche like a getaway car, weaving through the heavy Buckhead traffic with a reckless desperation that terrified the other drivers. Inside the leather interior, the air was thick with the smell of expensive cologne, masking the scent of fear and greed. Beatrice sat in the passenger seat, clutching the dashboard, her knuckles white. Chantel was in the back, refreshing Instagram as if the screen would give her answers. The St. Regis residences rose out of the skyline like a fortress of glass and steel. It was not just a building. It was a monument to the kind of wealth that did not shout. It whispered. And right now, that whisper was deafening to the three people storming its gates. Brad slammed on the brakes under the porte-cochere. A valet in a uniform that cost more than Chantella's dress opened the door. Brad tossed the keys at him without making eye contact. "Keep it close," he barked, his voice cracking slightly. "We will not be long." The valet caught the keys with one hand, his expression bored. He had seen 1,000 Brads before. Men who leased their lifestyles and paid with insecurity. He got into the car and drove it away, leaving them standing on the curb. They marched through the revolving glass doors. The lobby was a cavern of white marble and gold leaf. The silence was absolute. It was the kind of quiet that money buys. Their footsteps echoed loudly, clunky and intrusive against the stone. Beatrice smoothed her dress, her eyes darting around nervously. She was used to being the queen bee of her homeowners association. Here she was just a gnat. A security guard the size of a linebacker stood behind a desk made of solid onyx. He wore a black suit that fit him perfectly and an earpiece that blinked with a steady blue light. He did not smile as they approached. He did not offer a greeting. He just watched them with eyes that had seen everything. "Can I help you?" he asked, his voice a low rumble. Beatrice put on her most imperious face, the one she used on retail workers when she wanted a refund. "We are here to see Tiana Wilson, Penthouse 4004. I am her mother." The guard did not move. He did not check a list. He just looked at them. "Is she expecting you?" "Of course she is expecting us," Brad interjected, puffing out his chest and stepping forward. "We are family. This is a family emergency. Call her up. Tell her Brad and Beatrice are here." The guard looked at Brad. He looked at the sweat beading on Brad's forehead. He looked at the scuff on his leased loafers. He looked at Chantel, who was cowering slightly behind her mother. His expression did not change, but the air in the lobby seemed to drop 10 degrees. "I will call up," he said. "Step back from the desk, please." They stepped back, huddling together like sheep in a storm. They whispered furiously to each other, their eyes scanning the lobby, terrified that someone important might see them waiting. They were realizing that in this world, their suburban status meant absolutely nothing. They were trespassers. They were the help. And they were begging for entry. The guard spoke into the phone, his voice too low for them to hear. He nodded once. He hung up. He looked at them again. A small, almost imperceptible smile touched his lips. It was not a friendly smile. It was the smile of someone who knew exactly what was about to happen. "Ms. Wilson says you may go up." He pressed a button under the desk. "The private elevator bank is to the right. Penthouse access has been unlocked for 2 minutes. Do not keep her waiting." They scrambled toward the elevator, their dignity left somewhere back on the marble floor. They thought they were ascending to take control. They did not know they were walking into a lioness den. I watched them on the high-definition screen of the security monitor like a director watching a scene unfold. They looked small. On the black and white display, Beatrice looked less like a matriarch and more like a nervous tourist lost in a museum. Brad was adjusting his tie every 5 seconds, a nervous tick I had never noticed before. Chantel was checking her makeup in the reflection of the brass elevator doors, oblivious to the fact that her mascara was running. They were huddled together, a tight knot of anxiety and greed in the pristine expanse of the lobby. The intercom buzzed, interrupting the silence of the penthouse. I pressed the talk button. "Yes, Marcus." The guard's voice filled the room, calm and professional. "Ms. Wilson, your guests are here. They seem quite eager. Should I send them up or should I call the police?" I laughed softly. It was a genuine sound. "No police yet, Marcus. Let them up. I want to see their faces when the doors open." "Very good, Miss Wilson. Sending them up now." I walked over to the wet bar. I picked up the heavy bottle of Cristal. It was cold and sweating condensation. I poured a fresh glass, filling it almost to the brim. The bubbles hissed a soft applause. I walked to the center of the living room, where a large wingback chair upholstered in emerald velvet faced the private elevator doors directly. It was the kind of chair a villain sat in during the final act of a movie, or a queen holding court. I sat down, crossing my legs slowly, letting the slit in my $20,000 dress fall open just enough to show the diamond anklet I had bought on a whim. I rested my arm on the velvet armrest, holding the champagne flute with casual elegance. This was it. The moment I had dreamed of. Every time Beatrice told me I was worthless, every time Brad made a joke about my income, every time Chantel treated me like her personal assistant. They were coming up here expecting to find a disaster. They expected to find me manic broke or criminal. They were coming to lecture me, to take control, to sweep in and save the family name from my mess. They thought they were the heroes of this story, coming to rescue the fallen daughter. They had no idea they were walking into a courtroom, and I was the judge, jury, and executioner. I watched the digital floor indicator above the elevator doors. 1, 10, 20, 30. It was a long ride to the top. Plenty of time for them to sweat. Plenty of time for them to rehearse their speeches about responsibility and shame. I took a sip of wine. It tasted like cold stars. I checked my reflection in the darkened window. I did not look like the girl who peeled potatoes. I looked like the woman who owned the farm. The indicator hit 40. The bell chimed, a soft, polite sound that heralded the arrival of the barbarians. I swirled the wine in my glass. The doors began to slide open. Showtime. The elevator doors did not just open, they unveiled a war zone. Beatrice was the first one out, and she did not take a moment to admire the panoramic view or the crystal chandelier. She saw me sitting in that emerald velvet chair holding a glass of champagne that cost more than her mortgage, and she snapped. The vein in her forehead was pulsing so hard I thought it might burst. She stormed across the room, her heels striking the Italian marble like hammers. Brad and Chantel scrambled to keep up their eyes, darting around the room, assessing the value of every object they passed. But Beatrice had tunnel vision. Her target was my face. "You little thief!" she shrieked, her voice echoing off the high ceilings. "You ungrateful, lying little snake! How dare you? How dare you shame us like this?" She reached me in 3 strides. She raised her hand back. I saw the intent in her eyes. She wanted to hurt me. She wanted to put me back in my place, physically and violently. It was the same look she used to give me when I dropped a plate or spoke out of turn when I was a child. But I did not flinch. I did not raise my hand to block her. I did not even blink. I just watched her, watched. Just as her hand began its descent, a shadow moved from the darkened corner of the room. A hand the size of a catcher's mitt clamped around Beatrice's wrist, stopping her mid-swing. It was Big Tiny, the personal security detail Jalen had insisted I hire for the evening. He was 6'7" and built like a tank. "I would not do that if I were you, Ma." Tiny rumbled, his voice low and dangerous. Beatrice gasped, trying to yank her arm back, but Tiny held her fast. She looked up at him, then down at me. For the first time tonight, she looked afraid. "Get your hands off me," she sputtered. "I am her mother. I have the right to discipline my child." I took a slow sip of my Cristal. I let the bubbles burst on my tongue. I let the silence stretch. I let them soak in the image of me sitting untouched and unbothered while they stood there panting and disheveled. "You have no rights here, Beatrice," I said, my voice cool as the air conditioning. "This is my house. This is my security. And you are trespassing." Tiny let her go. Tiny released her arm with a gentle shove that sent her stumbling back into Brad. She rubbed her wrist, looking at me with a mixture of shock and hatred. I suggest you sit down. I continued, gesturing to the sofa opposite me with my glass. Before you get thrown down, we have a lot to discuss, and I am tired of shouting. Beatrice straightened her jacket, trying to regain some shred of dignity. She looked at the expensive furniture, then at her own family. Sit, she barked at them. We are going to get to the bottom of this. Tiana, you have a lot of explaining to do. I smiled over the rim of my glass. No, Mother. I am done explaining. Tonight, you are the ones who are going to listen. Beatrice's eyes stopped darting around the room looking for a weapon and started scanning the room like an appraiser at an estate sale. I watched the gears turn in her head. She looked at the Andy Warhol print on the wall. She looked at the floor-to-ceiling windows that framed the city like a living painting. She looked at the diamond bracelet resting on my wrist. And finally, she looked at the bottle of Cristal. The transformation was terrifying to watch. It was instantaneous. The vein in her forehead smoothed out. Her clenched fists relaxed. The snarl that had twisted her lips just seconds ago dissolved into a trembling pout. It was emotional whiplash. She took a breath, and when she exhaled, the rage was gone, replaced by a performance so sickly sweet it made my teeth ache. She took a step toward me, ignoring the fact that Tiny was still hovering just inches away. She clasped her hands over her chest, her eyes filled with tears on command. "Oh, Tiana," she breathed, her voice cracking perfectly. "My baby, my sweet baby girl." She sank onto the white boucle sofa opposite me, moving with the grace of a woman who suddenly realized she was sitting on a gold mine. She looked at me with an expression of wounded love. "I was just so scared, Tiana. Can you blame me? I see that picture online. I see you in this place with these things. My mind went to the darkest places. I thought you were in trouble. I thought you were doing something illegal. I thought someone was hurting you." She reached across the coffee table, her hand hovering over mine. I did not move my hand. I did not flinch. I just stared at her. "Is it true?" she whispered, leaning in conspiratorially. "Did you win? Is that where all this came from? Did you win the lottery?" She did not wait for an answer. She answered it herself with a gasp of pure theatrical delight. "Oh, Tiana, why did you hide it from us? Why did you hide it from your mother? We could have celebrated. We could have helped you. You know how dangerous it is for a young woman to have this much money all of a sudden. People will try to use you. Strangers, leeches, they will try to take advantage of your good nature." She looked over at Jalen, who was standing by the bar. She narrowed her eyes at him, then looked back at me, her voice dropping to a frantic whisper. "Who is he, Tiana? Is he one of them? Is he taking your money? You have to be careful. You need family around you. You need people who actually love you. People who have your best interests at heart. Not these sharks." Chantel and Brad were watching her, taking their cues from the master. They sat down next to her, their aggression melting away, replaced by a confused but eager greed. They sensed the shift. They smelled the money. "Mom is right, Tiana," Chantel said, her voice wavering. "We were just worried. That is why we came over. We thought you were having a breakdown. We just wanted to save you." I looked at them. 3 vultures in designer clothes pretending to be doves. 5 minutes ago, I was a disgrace. I was dead to them. Now that they smelled 9 figures, I was their baby. I was their concern. It was the most insulting thing they had ever done to me. They thought I was stupid. They thought they could erase a lifetime of abuse with 30 seconds of fake tears. I took another sip of champagne. I set the glass down on the marble with a soft clink. "Save me," I repeated, my voice flat. "You wanted to save me." "That is funny, Beatrice, because in the voicemail you left an hour ago you said I was a wretch. You said I was dead to you. Did I resurrect in the last 60 minutes? Or did you just realize that the wretch is the only one in this room who can pay your mortgage?" Beatrice flinched, but she did not back down. She doubled down. I was upset, Tiana. Mothers say things when they are upset. It is only because I love you so much. You have to forgive me. We are family. And now that you have this blessing, we need to stick together. You need us to help you manage this. We can protect you. I looked at Brad. He was nodding vigorously, his eyes fixed on the champagne bottle. We can protect you, he echoed. I smiled. It was a sharp, dangerous smile. Protect me, I asked. Like you protected your investors, Brad. Like you protected your credit score. The air left the room. Beatrice froze. Brad's face went the color of ash. The mask was slipping, and I was about to rip it off completely. While Beatrice was busy orchestrating her performance of the concerned mother, Chantel was vibrating with a different frequency entirely. It was a frequency I knew well. Pure, unadulterated envy. She was not looking at my face. She was staring at my dress. The midnight blue silk seemed to physically pain her. She had spent her entire life believing she was the princess, and I was the frog. Seeing the frog in couture was breaking her brain. She stood up abruptly, her movements jerky and uncoordinated. She walked toward me, her eyes locked on the fabric where it pooled elegantly on the marble floor. She reached out a hand. Her long acrylic nails painted a garish shade of pink hovered over the silk. She pinched the fabric between her thumb and forefinger, rubbing it aggressively as if trying to find a loose thread, a flaw, anything to prove it was fake. It is real, she whispered the words, tasting like ash in her mouth. She looked up at me, her face twisted into a snarl that ruined all the work of her expensive dermatologist. Take it off. I raised an eyebrow. Excuse me. You heard me, Tiana. Take it off. You do not deserve this. You do not deserve any of this. Look at you. You are sitting there like you are royalty, but we all know what you really are. You are a line cook, Tiana. You smell like onions and old grease. You serve people. You do not get served. She yanked on the fabric hard enough that I lurched forward slightly in my chair. Tiny stepped forward, but I held up a hand to stop him. I wanted to handle this myself. Let go of my dress, Chantel, I said, my voice low and dangerous. No, she screamed. It is wrong. It is unnatural. You are the loser, Tiana. You are the failure. Mom said so. Brad said so. Everyone knows it. You cannot just put on a dress and change who you are. You are nothing. You are a fraud, and I am not going to let you sit here and mock us with money you probably stole. She lunged. She did not go for my face. She went for the one thing in her reach that represented everything she wanted and could not have. The champagne flute. She grabbed for the stem, her claws seeking to snatch the crystal to smash it, or maybe just to drink it herself. But I was faster. I had spent 10 years working on a hot line where reflexes meant the difference between a perfect sear and a third-degree burn. With a flick of my wrist, I brought the glass up and out. The golden liquid arched through the air in a perfect wave. It splashed directly into Chantel's open, screaming mouth and across her chest, soaking into the cheap fabric of her fast fashion dress. She gasped, sputtering, coughing as the champagne dripped from her chin. Her mascara began to run instantly, creating black streaks down her face. She looked like a melting candle. I leaned back in my chair, setting the empty glass down on the table with a deliberate, calm click. Careful, Chantel, I said, my voice cutting through her coughing fit like a knife. That was 1982, Cristal. That sip alone cost more than that polyester knockoff you are wearing. I would hate for you to ruin it with your bad taste. Chantel stood there dripping and humiliated, her chest heaving. The silence in the room was absolute. Even Beatrice had stopped her fake crying to stare. For the first time in her life, Chantel had absolutely nothing to say. She had reached for the crown, and all she got was a wet dress and a lesson in economics. Brad stepped over his weeping wife as if she were a piece of luggage that had fallen open on the tarmac. He did not check to see if she was okay. He did not offer her a napkin. His eyes were fixed on me, and they held a terrifying mix of desperation and arrogance. He adjusted his silk tie, clearing his throat with a sound that was meant to command respect, but only betrayed his nervousness. He was a man used to walking into rooms and owning them simply because he was a white man in a suit. He thought the same magic would work here in my penthouse. He was wrong. He walked around the coffee table, encroaching on my personal space. He stood over me, trying to use his height to intimidate. I did not shrink back. I took another sip of my champagne and looked up at him with bored amusement. "All right, Tiana, enough of the theater," Brad said, his voice dropping into that patronizing register he used when explaining wine lists to waiters. "You have had your fun. You made your point. You are angry. We get it. But let us be adults here." He gestured around the room, encompassing the marble floors and the skyline view with a sweep of his hand. "This place. It is impressive. I will give you that. But we both know you did not buy this. You do not have the credit score to rent a storage unit, let alone a penthouse in the St. Regis. So who is it? Who is the benefactor? Is it a boyfriend? A loan shark? Who is actually on the deed, Tiana?" I said simply. "My name is on the deed, Brad. Paid in full. Cash." He laughed, a short, sharp bark of disbelief. "Cash? Tiana, do you know how money works? You do not just pay cash for a place like this. It requires liquidity. It requires capital. Concepts I am sure are foreign to you, since your biggest financial decision usually involves which brand of ramen to buy." He sat down on the edge of the table, invading my space further. He leaned in close, smelling of expensive scotch and fear. "Look, Tiana, I am trying to help you here. You have stumbled into some money. Maybe you won a scratch-off. Maybe you got a settlement. I do not know. But money like this, it is volatile. It disappears if you do not know how to husband it. And let us be honest, you are a line cook. You do not know the first thing about wealth management. You are going to get fleeced by the first con artist who walks through that door." He pointed a finger at Jalen, who was watching stoically from the bar. "Like him. Who is he? Some ambulance chaser. He is probably taking 40% off the top. You need family, Tiana. You need someone with actual financial expertise, someone who manages millions for a living, someone you can trust." He tapped his chest. "I can set up a portfolio for you tonight. We can move the assets into a secure family trust. I will manage it. I will make sure it grows. I will give you an allowance so you do not burn through it all on dresses and cars. It is the only responsible choice. You owe it to the family to share this burden. You owe it to Beatrice." I looked at him. I looked at the sweat beading on his upper lip. I looked at the way his eyes darted to my purse, where he thought my checkbook might be. He was not a financial genius. He was a drowning man trying to use me as a life raft. He thought I was stupid. He thought I was the same girl who scrubbed his floors yesterday. An allowance. I repeated, my voice dry. "You want to give me an allowance with my own money? It is for your own good," he said, his voice hardening. "You are not capable of handling this, Tiana. Hand over the account numbers. Now. Before you do something you regret." He reached out his hand, palm up, expecting me to just hand him the keys to the kingdom. It was the ultimate act of entitlement. He truly believed that his suit and his confidence were enough to strip me of everything I had. I smiled. It was the smile of a shark who just smelled blood in the water. "You want to talk about finances, Brad? Let us talk about finances. Let us talk about yours." His hand wavered. "What are you talking about?" "I am talking about Tony," I said softly. Brad froze. The color drained from his face so fast he looked like a corpse. His hand dropped. The arrogance evaporated, leaving only naked terror. "I know about Tony," I whispered. "And I know you don't have 3 days. You don't even have 3 hours." He stepped back, stumbling over his own feet. How do you know that name?" I didn't answer. I just looked past him toward the hallway where Jalen was stepping forward, holding a thick file folder. It was time to introduce the executioner. The footsteps on the marble floor were heavy and deliberate, making a sound that commanded immediate silence. Jalen walked out of the shadows of the hallway and into the light of the crystal chandelier. He held a thick manila folder in one hand and a glass of amber liquid in the other. He did not look at me. He looked straight at my brother-in-law with eyes that were cold and calculating. "Good evening, Bradley James Wilson." Jalen said, his voice smooth as silk, but hitting the room like a sledgehammer. Brad spun around so fast he nearly knocked over his drink. His eyes widened until I thought they might pop out of his skull. He stared at Jalen like he was seeing a ghost, or worse, a creditor. The color drained from his face, leaving him looking pasty and sick. "You," Brad stammered, his voice cracking. "You are Jalen Brooks. The Jalen Brooks. From Brooks and Associates." Beatrice looked between them, confused and irritated by her lack of knowledge. "Who is this man, Brad? Is he a friend of yours?" Brad let out a strangled laugh that sounded like a sob. "A friend, Beatrice. This is the most powerful asset protection attorney in the Southeast. He represents athletes, tech moguls, billionaires. He is a legend." He turned back to Jalen, his posture shifting instantly from arrogance to pathetic subservience. He hunched his shoulders, trying to make himself look smaller, trying to look harmless. He smoothed his tie with trembling hands. "Mr. Brooks, I am a huge admirer of your work. I have sent you several emails regarding a potential partnership. I am in wealth management myself, you know. I thought there might be some synergy between our firms." Jalen walked past him, ignoring the outstretched hand. He placed the folder on the coffee table next to the champagne bottle with a heavy thud. He did not smile. He did not blink. "I know who you are, Brad," Jalen said, cold indifference dripping from every syllable. "My secretary filters my emails. She has a special folder for nuisance correspondence. That is where your emails go. You are not in wealth management, Brad. You are in debt management, and you are failing at it." Brad recoiled as if he had been slapped. Chantel gasped, covering her mouth. Beatrice looked like she was trying to calculate the net worth of everyone in the room and getting a syntax error. "But why are you here?" Brad asked, his voice trembling so hard he could barely get the words out. "Why are you in Tiana's apartment?" "I am not just in her apartment," Jalen corrected him, stepping closer until he was looming over Brad. "I am on her payroll. I work for Tiana now. She is my priority client, which means her problems are my problems. And right now, Brad, you are a very big problem." He tapped the folder on the table with a manicured finger. "You wanted to talk about finances. You wanted to manage Tiana's money. That is rich coming from a man who has been rejected for a Target card 3 times this year." Brad looked at the folder. He looked at Jalen. He looked at me sitting calmly on my throne. The realization hit him like a physical blow. I had hired the man he could not even get on the phone. I commanded the person he worshipped. "You work for her." Brad whispered the words, barely escaping his throat. "Exclusively," Jalen said. "And unlike your investors, Tiana actually has capital to protect." "Now sit down, Brad. We are going to review your portfolio. And by portfolio, I mean the list of people you owe money to before they break your legs." Brad collapsed onto the sofa next to Beatrice. He looked small. He looked defeated. The suit did not fit him anymore. The confidence was gone. He was just a man in a room with people who were leagues above him, and he finally knew it. Jalen flipped open the manila folder with a casual flick of his wrist. The sound of the paper turning was the only noise in the penthouse, but it echoed like a gunshot. He pulled out a glossy document and slid it across the marble coffee table toward Beatrice. "Let us start with the Porsche," Jalen said, his voice conversational yet lethal. "The silver 911 Turbo S license plate, Brad 1. A beautiful machine." Beatrice sat up straighter, clutching her pearls. "It certainly is. Brad paid cash for it. He told us he wanted the best for his family." Jalen let out a short, humorless laugh. He told you he paid cash. The truth is he leased it, Beatrice. A predatory lease with an interest rate that should be illegal. And he has not made a payment in 4 months. The repossession order was issued last Tuesday. I actually tipped off the repo team on my way up. They are probably hooking it up to the tow truck right now. Brad made a noise like a wounded animal. He tried to stand up, but Tiny took one step forward, and Brad collapsed back into the sofa. Beatrice looked at the document, her hands shaking. No, that is impossible. He manages millions. He is a partner at the firm. He was a junior associate, Jalen corrected, pulling out another sheet. Was being the operative word. He was fired 6 months ago for misappropriating client funds. Since then, he has been funding your lifestyle with credit cards opened in your name, Chantel. Chantel gasped, grabbing her purse as if checking for her wallet. My name. You opened cards in my name. 6 of them, Jalen said, all maxed out. Nordstrom, Saks, Amex, $140,000 in debt, Chantel. And he has been using the minimum payments to pay off his gambling debts. Brad was weeping now, his face buried in his hands. It is pathetic. The man who had sneered at me at the bus stop was dissolving into a puddle of tears and lies. But that is not the worst part, is it? Brad? Jalen said, his voice dropping an octave. Brad looked up, his eyes pleading. Jalen, please, do not. Not that. I will fix it. I just need time. You are out of time, Jalen snapped. He pulled out the final document. It was a thick stack of papers with a red stamp on the front. He pushed it directly under Beatrice's nose. Beatrice, do you remember those papers Brad asked you to sign last month? He told you it was for tax optimization. He said it would protect your assets. Beatrice nodded slowly, her face gray. Yes. He said it was standard procedure for high-net-worth families. It was a second mortgage, Jalen said, delivering the final blow. A high-interest, hard money loan secured against your home. He forged your husband's signature and tricked you into signing the rest. He took out $300,000 of equity, Beatrice. And he lost it all on a bad crypto bet last week. Beatrice let out a scream that sounded like glass breaking. She grabbed the papers, staring at her own signature. The loan is in default, Jalen continued relentlessly. The bank has initiated foreclosure proceedings. You have 30 days to vacate the property. You do not own that house anymore, Beatrice. The bank does. And it is all because you trusted a man who is wearing a fake Rolex. I watched Beatrice. I watched the realization wash over her. The dinner parties, the bragging, the superiority. It was all gone. She was not the queen of the suburbs. She was homeless. And the man sitting next to her, the son-in-law she had praised while degrading me, was the architect of her destruction. You lost my house, Beatrice whispered, her voice trembling with a rage so pure it was terrifying. You lost my house. Brad shrank back into the cushions. I can fix it, B. I just need a little more capital. Tiana can help. Tiana can invest. I laughed. It was the only sound in the room. Invest. You want me to invest in a sinking ship, Brad? I think I will pass. I prefer to put my money in things that actually exist. The room erupted. The facade was gone. And the monsters were about to eat each other. The veneer of the happy family did not just crack, it shattered into a million jagged pieces right there on my living room floor. Beatrice launched herself at him, her manicured nails aiming for his eyes with a ferocity I had only ever seen directed at me. You parasite! She screamed, her voice shredding the expensive silence of the penthouse. You ruined me. You stole my house. You stole my life. Brad scrambled backward over the sofa cushions, his arms up to protect his face. Beatrice pummeled his chest with her fists, her jewelry catching the light as she struck him again and again. It was not a fight. It was a demolition. The woman who prided herself on decorum and etiquette was now brawling like a street fighter. Get off me, Brad shouted, shoving her away hard enough that she stumbled back into the coffee table, knocking over the bottle of Cristal. It rolled across the floor, spilling 20-year-old champagne onto the rug. Do not Act innocent. Beatrice. Brad yelled, his face red and sweating. You pushed me. You needed the country club membership. You needed the trips to Europe. You needed to show off to your sisters. I did this for you. I leveraged everything to keep up with your delusions of grandeur. Chantel stood up, her face streaked with black mascara, tears looking like a horror movie bride. She looked at Brad with pure revulsion. You opened cards in my name, she whispered, her voice rising to a shriek. You stole my identity. I have a 700 credit score, Brad. I had a future, and you turned me into a felon. She threw her purse at him. It hit him square in the chest. Then she took off her shoe, a 4-inch stiletto, and brandished it like a dagger. I hate you, she screamed. I hate you. You are nothing but a loser. Mom was right. I should have married the doctor. I sat back in my velvet chair and swirled the remaining champagne in my glass. I watched them tear each other apart. It was grotesque. It was violent. And it was the most satisfying entertainment I had ever witnessed. For years they had united to make me the scapegoat. I was the problem. I was the failure. But now that the money was gone and the lies were exposed, they were turning on each other like rats in a sinking ship. Tiny stepped forward, looking at me for a signal to intervene. I shook my head. Let them finish, I said softly. Beatrice was sobbing now, sitting on the floor amidst the spilled champagne and the ruins of her dignity. My house, she wailed. My beautiful house. Where am I going to live? What will the neighbors say? Brad was slumped on the sofa, his tie askew, staring at the wall. I did what I had to do, he muttered. It was supposed to work. The crypto was supposed to hit. Chantel was pacing back and forth, pulling at her hair. I am going to jail, she moaned. They are going to arrest me for credit card fraud. My life is over. I took a slow sip of my drink. The show was reaching its climax. They had stripped each other of every illusion. There was no love here. There was no loyalty. There was only greed and the panic of people who realized they had nothing left to trade. I set my glass down. The sound cut through their weeping. Are you done? I asked, my voice calm and authoritative. Because you are making a mess of my floor. And unlike you, I actually care about the value of my property. They all looked up at me. 3 pairs of eyes, red and desperate, locking onto the only person in the room who had a lifeline. The fighting stopped instantly. The hatred evaporated, replaced by a terrifying, unified hunger. They remembered where they were. They remembered who had the money. Tiana, Beatrice whispered, scrambling to her knees. Tiana, baby, you see what he did to us. You see what he did to your mother. You have to help us. You are the only one who can fix this. I looked down at her. She was on her knees. The woman who had banned me from Thanksgiving was begging at my feet. It was a powerful image, but I wasn't done yet. I had one more card to play, and it was going to cost them everything. The room fell into a silence that was even more terrifying than the screaming. The energy shifted from violent rage to a cold, hollow desperation. They looked like survivors of a shipwreck washing up on the shore, only to realize the island was inhabited by the person they had thrown overboard. Brad was catatonic, staring at his hands as if they belonged to a stranger. Chantel was shivering, her arms wrapped around herself, her arrogance stripped away, leaving only a frightened child. But Beatrice was the first to move. She looked at the devastation of her life, the foreclosure, the debt, the humiliation. Then she looked at me. She looked at the diamonds on my wrist. She looked at the indifference in my eyes. She did the math. I was the only variable in the equation that could balance the books. Beatrice crawled. She actually crawled across the expensive rug, pushing aside the broken glass of the champagne flute. She reached out and grabbed the hem of my dress. Her hands were shaking. Her perfect manicure was chipped. Tiana, she rasped, her voice wrecked from screaming. Tiana, baby, look at me. Look at your mother. I looked down. It was a view I never thought I would see. The woman who had towered over my childhood, who had made me feel small for 29 years, was now smaller than she had ever been. You have to help us, Tiana. You are the only one. Brad lied to us. He tricked us. He is a criminal, Tiana. He preyed on us. You heard what Jalen said. He stole my equity. He stole my home. The house you grew up in, Tiana. The house where we raised you. It is going to be taken by the bank. They will put a lock on the door. They will throw our furniture on the lawn. She started to sob again, but this time it felt different. It wasn't the fake performance from earlier. This was the raw, ugly crying of a woman watching her status evaporate. We will be homeless, Tiana. Your sister will go to jail. Your father will have nowhere to go. You cannot let that happen. You have millions now. Millions. This debt is nothing to you. It is pocket change. Just write a check. Just make it go away. Please, Tiana, be the bigger person. Be the daughter I know you are. Chantel scrambled over, joining her mother on the floor. She grabbed my other hand. Her grip was wet and clammy. I didn't know, Tiana, she pleaded. I swear I didn't know. He told me he was handling everything. He told me I could spend whatever I wanted. Do not let me go to prison, Tiana. I cannot go to prison. I am not built for that. Please. You won. Okay. You won the game. You are the rich one. Just save us. I looked at them. Two women groveling at my feet, begging for salvation from the very person they had spit on 24 hours ago. They were using every trigger they had installed in me. Guilt, obligation, family. They were banking on the fact that the old Tiana the doormat was still in there somewhere. They thought that if they begged hard enough, if they blamed Brad loud enough, I would open my checkbook just to make the crying stop. I looked over at Jalen. He was watching me, his face impassive, but his eyes alert. He was waiting for my signal. He knew the next move. I gently pulled my dress out of Beatrice's grip. I stood up. The movement made them recoil slightly, but they stayed on their knees, looking up at me with wet, hopeful eyes. You want me to save the house? I asked, my voice soft. Yes. Beatrice breathed hope, flooding her face. Yes, Tiana. Save the house. Save the family. I walked over to the wall safe hidden behind the Warhol print. I keyed in the code. The heavy door swung open. I reached inside and pulled out a thick blue folder. I walked back to them. I anticipated this moment, I said, holding the folder up. I knew you would ask. And I have a solution. Beatrice scrambled to her feet, wiping her face. Thank God. I knew it. I knew you loved us. How much is it? Is it enough to cover the mortgage and the credit cards? I handed her the folder. Open it, I said. She tore it open, her greedy eyes scanning the pages. Then she stopped, her brow furrowed. She looked up at me, confusion warring with a new kind of horror. This isn't a check, she whispered. This is a deed transfer. Keep reading, Mother, I said. She read. Her lips moved silently. Then she dropped the folder as if it were burning hot. She looked at me, and for the first time, she didn't see a daughter or a savior. She saw the landlord. You bought the debt, she gasped. I smiled, and it was the coldest smile I had ever worn. I didn't just buy the debt, Beatrice. I bought the house. I walked to the wall safe hidden behind the Warhol print. The room was so quiet you could hear the blood rushing in their ears. They were watching me like starving dogs watching a butcher chop meat. Beatrice had pulled herself up from the floor, clutching her chest, her eyes wide and wet with hope. Brad was leaning forward on the sofa, his hands clasping and unclasping. Chantel was holding her breath. They thought I was their savior. They thought I was going to pull out a checkbook and write a number with so many zeros it would erase their sins. They thought the old Tiana, the one who craved their approval, was back. I punched in the code. Beep, 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 click. The heavy steel door swung open. Inside, sitting on a velvet shelf, was not a stack of cash. It was a single thick blue folder. I pulled it out. I weighed it in my hand. It felt heavy. It felt like justice. I turned back to them. Beatrice took a step forward, her hand outstretched. "Thank you, Tiana," she sobbed. "I knew you would do the right thing. I knew you would not let us lose our home. You are a good daughter, a good Christian girl. How much is it? Is it enough to clear the second mortgage?" I did not say a word. I just handed her the folder. She grabbed it, tearing at the seal like a child on Christmas morning. She flipped it open. Her eyes scanned the first page, then the second. Her smile faltered. Her brow furrowed. She looked up at me, confusion clouding her teary eyes. "I do not understand," she stammered. "This is not a check. These are legal documents. Assignment of note. Transfer of lien. What does this mean, Tiana?" Brad snatched the folder from her hands. His eyes darted across the lines of legal text. His face went from pale to a sickly shade of green. He dropped the folder on the coffee table as if it were radioactive. "She bought the note," he whispered, his voice trembling with horror. "She did not pay off the bank, Beatrice. She bought the debt from them." Beatrice looked from him to me, her brain struggling to process the information. Bought the debt. What does that mean? "It means mother," I said, my voice filling the room, calm and cold as the grave that I am the bank now. I stepped closer to them. "Jalen called the lender this morning. They were very happy to offload a high-risk, distressed asset for a lump sum cash payment. I bought the mortgage. I bought the second mortgage. I bought the liens. I own the paper on your house, Beatrice. Every brick, every shingle, every blade of grass on that manicured lawn. It belongs to the Phoenix Fund. It belongs to me." Beatrice gasped, clutching her throat. "So you own the house. That means we are safe, right? You are my daughter. You own it so we can stay. You did this to protect us." I laughed. It was a dark sound, devoid of any warmth. "Protect you, Beatrice. You kicked me out of that house because my car was ugly. You made me scrub the floors of that house while you laughed at me. You told me I was not welcome in that house because I was a shame. Why would I protect the place where I was abused?" I leaned in close so she could see the hard truth in my eyes. "I did not buy it to save you, Mother. I bought it to evict you. I am not your savior. I am your landlord. And rent is past due." The scream that tore out of her throat was the sound of a woman realizing that the daughter she threw away had just come back to repossess her life. Beatrice looked at me like I had grown a second head. "Evict us," she sputtered. "You cannot evict your own mother. This is my home. I decorated every room. I picked out those drapes. I planted the rose bushes. It is a structure, Beatrice," I said, cutting her off. "It is 4 walls and a roof. And right now, it is housing 4 people who have never done a single thing to earn their keep. You lived there on credit. You lived there on lies. And now the bill is due." I walked over to the window and looked out at the city. "You have 30 days, I said, not turning around. "That is the legal minimum. Jalen has the paperwork ready. If you are not out by noon on the 30th day, the sheriff will remove you, and anything you leave behind becomes the property of the Phoenix Fund." Chantel started crying again. "But where will we go, Tiana? Brad broke us. We have no money. You cannot just throw us on the street. We are your blood. Blood," I repeated, turning to face them. "Blood does not pay the mortgage, Chantel. And honestly, I do not want your blood in my house anymore. I have plans for that property." Beatrice wiped her eyes, hoping for a reprieve. "Plans? What kind of plans? Are you going to sell it? Flip it?" "No," I said. "I am going to gut it. I am going to tear down your tacky wallpaper and rip out your pretentious carpets. I am going to turn it into a transitional housing center for young women who have been kicked out of their homes by toxic families." Beatrice gasped. "A shelter? You are going to turn my beautiful colonial estate into a homeless shelter?" I smiled. "Yes. I think it is poetic, do not you? The house that was a prison for me will become a sanctuary for girls just like me. Girls who were told they were not good enough. Girls who were abandoned. Finally, that house will see some actual love inside its walls. You are doing this to spite me. Beatrice hissed, her sadness turning back into rage. You know how much I care about appearances. You know what the neighbors will say. I walked back to her until I was standing right over her. I do not care about the neighbors, Beatrice. I do not care about your bridge club. I do not care about your reputation. Your reputation is built on sand. And the tide just came in. You called me a parasite for years. You told everyone I was a drain on the family. But look at us now. Who is the parasite, Beatrice? Who is the one begging for a place to sleep? I pointed to the door. Get out. Go home and start packing. You have a lot of boxes to fill. And Beatrice, do not try to take the fixtures. I have a detailed inventory. If a single sconce is missing, I will deduct it from the cash I am giving you for the Uber. Brad stood up slowly. He looked like a man walking to the gallows. He took Beatrice's arm. Come on, Bea. She means it. We have to go. They shuffled toward the elevator, a broken parade of losers. They had walked in as royalty. They were leaving as refugees. I watched them go, feeling a weight lift off my chest that I had carried since I was a child. The house was gone. The family was gone. And all that was left was the future. The silence following my eviction notice was shattered by a sound that made Brad jump out of his skin. The wail of sirens. Blue and red lights flashed against the glass of the floor-to-ceiling windows, painting the living room in the colors of emergency. They were not passing by on the highway. They were stopped right downstairs at the main entrance of the St. Regis. Brad ran to the window, looking down. His knees gave out and he collapsed against the glass, sliding down until he was sitting on the floor. They are here, he whispered. They are coming for me. Chantel rushed to him, grabbing his shoulders. Who, Brad? Who is coming? Is it Tony? Is it the loan sharks? Jalen stepped forward, clearing his throat. It is not Tony, Chantel. It is the Atlanta Police Department, and probably a few agents from the FBI. Financial fraud on this scale tends to attract federal attention. Beatrice spun around. You called the police. You called the police on family. I did not call them, Jalen said calmly, checking his watch. The bank did. Once I flagged the fraudulent mortgage documents, they were obligated to report it. Identity theft, forgery, wire fraud. It is quite a list, Brad. The elevator chimed. It was the only sound in the room besides Chantel's ragged breathing. The doors slid open. 4 officers in uniform and 2 men in suits stepped out. They looked out of place in the luxury penthouse, their heavy boots thudding on the marble. Bradley James Wilson, one of the suits, asked, scanning the room. Brad did not even try to run. He just held up his hands, weeping openly. I am here. Please. I can explain. The officers pulled him up roughly. They spun him around and the metallic click of handcuffs echoed off the high ceilings. It was a final, definitive sound. The end of the road. Chantel let out a scream that tore her throat. No, you cannot take him. He is my husband. He is a partner. Tell them, Mom. Tell them he is important. Beatrice stood there, her mouth opening and closing like a fish. She looked at Brad, the man she had bragged about. The man she had chosen over her own daughter, now bent over in handcuffs. The shame was burning her alive. Tiana, Brad blubbered as they dragged him toward the elevator. Tiana, help me. Pay the bail. I will pay you back. I swear. I watched him go. I watched the man who had mocked my car, who had treated me like dirt, being hauled away like common trash. I felt nothing. No pity. No joy. Just the cold satisfaction of balance being restored. He is not going to need bail, I said to the empty air where he had just stood. He is going to need a miracle. Chantel collapsed onto the floor, sobbing into the expensive rug, ruining it with her makeup. Beatrice stared at the closing elevator doors, looking like she had aged 20 years in 20 seconds. The police were gone. Brad was gone. The only thing left was the wreckage of their delusions. The silence that followed the elevator doors closing on Brad was heavy and suffocating. Beatrice stood in the center of the room, her hands trembling by her sides. Her face was a ruin of smeared makeup and shattered pride. Chantel was still on the floor, weeping into her hands, the sound muffled and pathetic against the vastness of the penthouse. They looked at me waiting. They were waiting for the hug. They were waiting for me to say that now that the bad man was gone, we could be a family again. They were waiting for me to promise to fix the mess Brad had made. They still did not get it. They still thought this was about Brad. They did not understand that he was just a symptom of their disease. I did not move toward them. I signaled Tiny with a small nod. He stepped forward, his shadow falling over Chantel. "It is time to leave, ladies," he rumbled. Beatrice looked up at him, then at me. Her eyes filled with a fresh wave of tears, but these were different. These were tears of fear. "Tiana, please," she whispered. "We have no way to get home. Brad drove us. His car is gone. We are stranded." I looked at them. Stranded. Just like I had been on the side of the road when my car broke down and Brad laughed at me. Just like I had been when Beatrice told me not to come to Thanksgiving because my presence was an embarrassment. I walked over to my purse, which was sitting on the kitchen island next to the untouched appetizers. I opened it and pulled out my wallet. It was a new wallet, soft Italian leather, but inside I kept a reminder of who I used to be. I pulled out 2 crisp $100 bills. I walked back to them. I stood over Chantel, who was struggling to her feet, leaning on her mother for support. They looked at the money in my hand with confusion. "Here," I said, thrusting the bills at Chantel. She took them instinctively, her fingers closing over the paper. "What is this?" she asked, her voice shaking. "It is Uber money," I said, my voice cold and flat. "It is enough to get you back to the suburbs. Back to the house you have 30 days to vacate. Call a car. Get out of my sight." Beatrice stared at the money in Chantel's hand. Her face crumpled. "You are paying us to leave?" she choked out. "Like we are strangers. Like we are nothing." "No, Beatrice," I said, stepping closer until I was right in her face. "I am treating you exactly the way you treated me. Remember the phone call? You told me to stay away so I did not bring shame to your house. Well, now the tables have turned. You are the shame, Beatrice. You and your greed and your cruelty. You do not belong in this world. You do not belong in my home." I pointed to the door. "Take the money, call a ride, and do not ever come back here. If you try to contact me, if you try to come to my restaurant, if you try to step foot on this property again, I will have you arrested for trespassing. And unlike Brad, I will not need to lease the police car." Chantel clutched the money to her chest, looking at me with wide, terrified eyes. She finally saw me. She did not see the sister she could bully. She saw the owner. She grabbed her mother's arm and pulled. "Come on, Mom," she whispered, dragging Beatrice toward the elevator. "We have to go." Beatrice looked back at me one last time. Her eyes were searching for something, some flicker of the daughter she used to control. But there was nothing there. Just a woman in a $20,000 dress who had finally learned her worth. They scurried into the elevator, huddled together like refugees. The doors slid shut, cutting off their view of my paradise. I stood there in the silence alone, but not lonely. I looked at the spot where they had stood. The air felt cleaner already. The trash had taken itself out. And it only cost me $200. Best money I ever spent. The elevator machinery hummed one last time and then fell silent. The digital floor indicator went dark. They were gone. The penthouse was quiet again, but it was not the lonely silence I had felt before. It was the peaceful silence of a storm that had finally blown itself out. The air felt lighter. It was as if the very molecules of the room had realigned themselves now that the toxicity had been purged. I stood in the center of the living room, looking at the empty space where my family had knelt. There was a faint stain on the rug where the champagne had spilled, and a scuff mark from Brad's shoe. That was all that remained of them. Small messes that could be easily cleaned, unlike the mess they had made of my life, which had taken years to scrub away. Jalen walked over from the bar. He had poured 2 fresh glasses of whiskey. Not the showy champagne, but the good steady stuff. He handed one to me. His face was serious, but his eyes were warm. "How do you feel?" he asked quietly. I took the glass. I swirled the amber liquid, watching the light catch it. I searched inside myself for the guilt. I looked for the sadness. I looked for that familiar ache of a daughter who just wanted her mother to love her. But I found nothing. It was like reaching for a phantom limb. The pain was gone because the rot had been cut out. I feel I started, and then I stopped. I took a breath. I feel light, Jalen. I feel like I just set down a backpack filled with rocks that I have been carrying since I was 5 years old. Jalen clinked his glass against mine. A soft, clear sound. To freedom, he said. To freedom, I repeated. We drank. The whiskey burned, going down a cleansing fire. People always say money cannot buy happiness, I said, walking over to the window, and maybe they are right. Money did not make my mother love me. Money did not make my sister a good person. Money did not turn Brad into an honest man. But you know what money did buy, Jalen. He joined me at the window, looking out at the sprawling lights of Atlanta. What is that? It bought me a lock on the door, I whispered. It bought me a security guard named Tiny. It bought me the power to say no. It bought me the ability to protect myself from people who would bleed me dry if I let them. It bought me out of the cage. I looked at my reflection in the glass. The woman staring back was not the girl in the grease-stained apron. She was not the scapegoat. She was Tiana Wilson, owner, survivor. I turned back to the room. Maria and the others were starting to clean up, but I waved them down. Leave it, I said. Tonight we celebrate. The cleaning can wait until tomorrow. Tonight we enjoy the peace. I sat down on the sofa, stretching my legs out. I closed my eyes and listened to the jazz music playing softly in the background. It sounded better now, clearer. I was alone in terms of blood, but I was surrounded by loyalty. I realized then that family is not about who you share DNA with. It is about who stands next to you when the walls come down. And for the first time in my life, I was standing with the right people. The check had cleared, the debt was paid, and I was finally free. The air in Paris tasted different than the air in Atlanta. It tasted like butter and rain and history. I stood on the Pont des Arts looking down at the Seine River as it flowed sluggishly beneath my feet. The sun was setting, painting the sky in shades of lavender and apricot that reminded me of the dress I wore the night I burned my old life down. It had been exactly 1 year, 365 days since the eviction, since the police cars, since the end. In that time I had not just survived, I had thrived. The Phoenix Fund was not just a bank account anymore, it was a force of nature. I had launched the Grandma Rose Scholarship, providing full rides to culinary school for underprivileged kids who had the talent, but not the means. I had opened 2 more restaurants in Atlanta and put Maria in charge of the entire group. She sent me pictures every week of the packed dining rooms and the smiling staff. I took a sip of my coffee. It was rich and dark, just the way I liked it. I was free. I was wealthy. I was at peace. And then my phone buzzed. It was a burner phone I kept for emergencies only. A number almost no one had. I frowned, pulling it from my coat pocket. A text message from an unknown number. My thumb hovered over the screen. I should have ignored it. But curiosity, that old fatal flaw, got the better of me. I opened it. Tiana, please. It is Mom. I got this number from a cousin. Please do not block me. We are living in a motel off the highway. Brad got 5 years. Chantel is working at a diner, but it is not enough. We are hungry, Tiana. We are family. You made your point. You won. Please just send us $5,000, just enough to get an apartment. I am begging you. I am your mother. I stared at the words. A year ago, reading that would have sent me into a spiral of guilt and obligation. I would have felt the old hooks tugging at my heart. I would have wondered if I was a bad person. I would have wanted to fix it. But today, standing on a bridge in Paris, I felt nothing. It was like reading a script for a character I no longer played. The woman who wrote that text was a stranger. A stranger who had watched me drown and asked why I was getting the carpet wet. She said I won. She was right. But the prize was not the money. The prize was this moment right here, the realization that her suffering was not my responsibility. Her hunger was the result of her own menu. I did not type a reply. I did not feel the need to have the last word. I had already said everything that needed to be said when I handed her that eviction notice. I pressed the block collar button. One tap, a digital wall slamming shut forever, but it still felt too close. The phone felt heavy in my hand, like it was carrying the weight of their misery. I did not want it. I did not want the connection. I did not want the possibility of another buzz, another plea, another attempt to drag me back into the mud. I looked at the dark water swirling below. It looked cold and deep and final. I extended my arm over the railing. I held the phone out. The metal was cool against my skin. "Goodbye, Beatrice," I whispered. I opened my fingers. The phone tumbled end over end. It caught the last light of the sunset flashing once like a dying star. Then it hit the water with a small, insignificant splash. It sank instantly, swallowed by the river, gone forever. I waited for the regret. I waited for the panic. But all I felt was the breeze on my face and the warmth of the coffee in my hand. I smiled. It was a real smile. Not for an audience, not for Instagram, just for me. I turned my back on the river and walked toward the lights of the city. I had a dinner reservation at a bistro that was supposed to have the best soufflé in France, and for the first time in my life, I was not going to be serving it. I was going to be savoring it. The check was paid, the table was cleared, and my life was finally truly my own. The most profound lesson from this story is that true family is defined by loyalty and love, not just blood relations. Tiana's experience illustrates that money acts as a magnifying glass, revealing people's true character. Her relatives despised her when she was poor, but worshipped her wealth, proving their affection was entirely transactional. Ultimately, the story teaches us that self-worth comes from within. We must have the courage to set boundaries and cut off toxic relationships to find peace. Freedom is found not just in financial abundance, but in surrounding yourself with people who genuinely value you for who you are. Looking back, I realize my biggest mistake wasn't hiding my success. It was staying silent for too long when I was being disrespected. If there's one thing I hope you don't repeat, it's believing that enduring humiliation will somehow earn you love or acceptance. It won't. What I learned is, this people don't always reveal who they are when times are good. They reveal it when they think you have nothing to offer. Protect your dignity, set boundaries early, and never measure your worth by someone else's approval. If this story resonated with you, I'd love to hear your thoughts. Leave a comment, share it with someone who might need it, and consider subscribing if you want to follow more stories like this. Thank you so much for staying with me until the end. And a quick note, the next story includes some fictionalized elements created for educational purposes. If that's not for you, feel free to exit and choose content that better suits you.